playmats, tokens, and art prints from the world of Magic and from outside of the world of Magic. They've got their classic art tokens line, which is art from throughout history put onto Magic tokens. Really, really great stuff. Notably, they do currently have a playmat with Ponder.
Your game can start.
Which is
Your
somewhat
game
relevant
has
to
started.
folks who have been keeping abreast of news. There was a very, very nice Ponder playmat just previewed for the Pauper event that CFB is doing. But they've also got it. It doesn't have all the cool little championship things in it. But regardless, they make great products. We stand by them 100%. And if you are interested in getting some stuff to spruce up your play experience, your play area, and you want to go over to Original Magic Card and you want to get some stuff from them, use our affiliate code when you check out. It's commentary, spelled as it is in the name of this podcast, and all caps, and you get 5% off your order. We get a little bit of a kickback, so not only do you get a discount, you're also helping us keep the lights on here. And once again, that code is commentary, spelled as it is in the name of the show, all caps. What do you have for us today, Adrian?
Well, I'll have you know that we're also brought to you by our Patreon. Thank you, patrons. For just $1 an episode, you too can hear the full show, including our pre and post shows, as well as getting full access to our patron-exclusive Discord channel, where it's always a good time. We're currently in the middle of our patron drive. We're only $6 shy of our goal of $100 an episode. If we reach it before my 27th birthday, which is coming up on the 16th, we will be giving away a free playmat to one lucky winner through a drawing. Yeah, that's it. That's good.
Awesome.
All right, that's a wrap. Head home, everyone. We're all advertisements now. There's no show.
Yeah, just all ads 24/7.
Just pack it up. Just kidding.
So do you want to tell the folks at home what we're talking about today?
Yeah, absolutely. Today we're going to be talking about a deck that's near and dear to our friend Alex's heart, White Weenie. Turns out this archetype's been around for forever. We got an email in recently asking us to look at one of the soldiers decks that used to be around back in the day, and I was talking to Mike and I said, why don't we just cover the archetype? You know, there's actually a couple directions you can take White Weenie in the format, and I think where we really wanted to start is back in 1996, White Weenie won a world championship. Should I go ahead and talk about some of the cards from back then, Mike?
Yeah, because this is really interesting. I knew it was an old archetype, but I didn't realize quite how old, because I was not playing Magic at this point. I was 6.
It's also one of Craig Wesco's pet decks, so, I mean, there is like a pedigree to White Weenie. Its most recent form now that you can play it in is really Death and Taxes in Legacy. And basically the strategy around the deck is to leverage aggressive white creatures, and in the more modern bent of the deck, you use creatures that disrupt your opponent, like Thalia Guardian Thraben, Containment Priest, cards that are looking to not only provide a small clock, but also disrupt your opponent's plan. Well, way back in the day, the order of the a bit of a joke. The order of the day was that you really needed to be pro-black, it feels like, because black or mono black was one of the strong decks from back then. So we're running cards that are even legal today, like Order of Lightbearer, which is a pro-black human cleric knight. Wow, so that's a lot of creature types. Order of the White Shield, again a protection for black creature. Actual White Knight, again a protection for black creature. And its curve toppers were cards like Sarah Angel, so you beat him with a Vigilance, 4/4 with flying. And then there were a couple of other cards, like obviously Swords to Plowshares got played as one of the best removals. Got a full 4 copies of Disenchant, I imagine, for your opponent's Mishra's Factories, and of course Strip Mine. So the deck is definitely not like that anymore, but sort of the core is the same, where you can see some of these disruptive elements coupled with aggressive creatures that are also capable of disrupting certain decks' plans.
Yeah, and one of the hallmarks of this deck has always been a very sort of low-to-the-ground curve that makes it so you will be able to cast almost everything in your hand. You're not often left in a position where you have things that are just stranded in your hand because you don't play them, and that is one of the... It's an aggro deck, right?
And in the vein of that deck, we're really going to cover 4 different decks today which I guess technically 5 if we count that one, which is, I think, a color commentary record. We're going to be covering token strategy, mono-white token strategy. We're going to cover just straight up mono-white, value features, I guess you could call it, or more of the way this deck impressive features introduce with them. We're going to be covering full, which is a drive that you can cover. And we're going to be covering a deck deck that also leverages lots of artifacts.
Yeah, and the thing is, for a long time, mono at the top of the charts, pretty much as long as I've been playing Pauper. I can't remember a time when they were like really a force to be reckoned with, but you see them every now and then, and they have gotten some really, really great tools over the years. Notably, I think all 4 of these decks. No, 3 out of these 4 decks are playing just the full playset of 3 of spectrum, which I think is very, very typical of these types of decks. It's slightly above vanilla test, and it has a little bit of upside. And I think that's really where these decks want to sit a lot of the time, is like just a little bit more efficient than they should be, and some sort of additional text if possible.
Exactly. So we didn't really talk about how we're going to do this. Do you just want to run through these deck lists real fast, point out the similarities, sort of end on a...
I think it would be good if we just kind of crack into these lists and don't go super deep on them, but talk about what makes them special,
like what makes them unique and what makes them the same. I like that. So if you don't mind, I'll go ahead and get into our tokens list.
Yeah, go for it.
So first of all, you'll see these 2 cards recurring throughout our White Weenie decks. Soul Warden and Soul's Attendant, affectionately referred to as the Soul Sisters. These are 1-1 W, where when a creature enters the battlefield, you Soul Warden, you just gain life, and Soul Attendant they're pretty straightforward. Used to help them all out, use some life. Very powerful on these decks, you're playing a lot. Next, we've got 4 copies of Grievous Surgeon, ubiquitous across the white decks. Another white all-star, Squadron Hawk, affectionately referred to as the White Brainstorm. 1 and a W gets a 1/1 flyer. Search your library for up to 3. Reveal them, put them in your hand, and shuffle your library. In the air. I think people refer to it like Ancestral or Brainstorm. And it's strong with some of the other effects that we'll see later on in the deck. We've also got 3 copies of Veteran Armor, which is a soldier, which is again shared with these decks. 1 in a W gets you a 2/2. Other creatures you control get +0/+1. This is a main deck way of beating Electrickery. So it's sort of pre-boarded against it. A lot of people are, boarding or have Electrickery main deck these days. But it also means that you have an aggressive creature that helps your team that you also don't have to sideboard out in matchups where Electrickery is going to be relevant.
Yeah, and it also just generally helps with keeping your creatures a little bit more resilient. Just because this deck, looking through this, can make a whopping, of all its token generators, so it's only got 17 creatures in the deck, but if you count all the tokens it can generate, we're looking at 8, 16, 32, and another 9. So we're looking at 41 tokens that can be created. You kind of want to keep those things alive. And
right.
And Veteran Armor helps with that. And there are very popular decks right now that are running a main deck Electrickery. So having some level of resilience to that in your main deck at this point just feels like it's mandatory for me. So
I do want to get into the spells also. You sort of brought it up. This deck has the least amount of creatures out of all of them, 17 compared to the others, upwards of almost 30, and then one of them actually has over 30 creatures. But we make up for it, like you said, in the spells. So we have 4 copies of Gather the Townsfolk, 1 in a W. You put 2 1/1 white human creatures on the battlefield. If you have 5 or less life, you get 5 of them instead. Raise the Alarm, which is probably one of the best ones in my opinion. An instant, 1 and a white gets you 2 white soldier creature tokens. And then we also have Battle Screech, which I guess is actually probably the best one. You put 2/1/1 white bird creature tokens into play, and then with Flashback, you can tap 2 white creatures and then put 2 more into play, or 3 white creatures, put 2 more into play, and then 3 copies of Triplicate Spirits, which is a convoke spell that allows you to put 3/1/1 white spirit creature tokens of flying onto the battlefield. Now, these tokens are backed up by pump effects. Guardian's Pledge, 1 WW for an instant. White creatures you control get +2/+2 until end of turn. Remotion Rally, which is kind of the same. It normally costs 3 and a W, but if you control planes, you can tap an untapped creature you control rather than pay its cost. And your creatures will get +1/+1 until end of turn. And then we have a 1/of copy of Rally the Peasants, +2/+0 till end of turn for 2 and a W, flashback 2 and a red. So we're all about creating a bunch of evasive tokens and then winning in 1 turn by casting one of these huge pump spells.
Yeah, and it also just does have the alternate game plan of just going wide enough that it can get in around any blockers that your opponent has, because outside of elves, how many other decks can really sort of keep pace with this if it's going like, I don't know, turn 1 Warden, turn 2 hold up, Raise the Alarm, turn 3 Thraben Inspector, Gather, like you're just flooding the board very, very efficiently. And outside of elves, I think most decks are hard pressed to actually find enough blockers to deal with this. And the fact that on turn 3 you can just Guardian's Pledge to pump everything up is really, really powerful. And I think that's this deck is, you know, token decks have been a staple of many formats, and this one, while again not seeing a whole ton of play, this did well in a challenge at the beginning of the month. This is not a super old result that we had to dig up. This is just not the world's most popular deck, and that, I don't know. I wouldn't mind seeing more of this deck, because looking at it right now, it seems simple but effective.
And I won't get too much into the sideboards. I do want to talk about some of the common cards, pardon the pun, that you might see across these decks. We have 2 copies of Journey to Nowhere, 2 copies of Lumathread Field, which is additional protection from Electrickery. It, pumps your butt. And then we have 3 copies of Patrician Scorn, which lets you destroy enchantments for free if you played another white spell in the same turn. So those are cards I would expect to see across a lot of these sideboards, but I don't know if we should get super duper into the sideboard stuff. White has some of the best sideboard cards available, in the history of the game. So
yeah, and as you said, these will be fairly similar, because the very best of these options are pretty well accepted as what you want to be playing for white. So this tokens build is this really go wide strategy. How do you feel about this in the current game?
I think that it's a little evident in this deck. You have to tech really, really hard against cards like Electrickery, which is a very popular card. So I don't know. I think you can probably run Delver over if you have the nut draw. But between Swirling Sandstorm, wow, Electrickery, and the fact that they have a ton of random 1/1s they might not care a whole bunch about, I think it get a little dicey. I think you're really going to prey on some slower decks that maybe don't have as much interaction. One thing I do like about it is it has one of the same upsides as the Delver lists, where what creature do you kill? You can obviously get rid of Soul Warden and Soul's Attendant so they don't gain life, but each one of these creatures individually isn't really a big deal, so spending a whole card to get rid of them feels really bad. So I do like that aspect of it.
Yeah, I feel like most of your spot removal is going to point towards stuff like Veteran Armor, and I've just got to toss it out there. This deck makes Edict based removal just miserable. You're pretty much never going to resolve an Edict against this deck and feel good about it.
Right, I think that's a big positive for it.
Yeah. It is still weak to stuff like Evenkar's Justice and Crypt Rats in whatever quantities those are showing up in the metagame. And with the rise of the white-black Pestilence deck, this deck might get edged out a little bit just because Pestilence does not have to try very hard to blow up everything in this deck. So they might even be able to, keep Pestilence around just by having a 2/3, not necessarily their little cute combo with Guardian of the Guild Pact. So it definitely has some very bad matchups, and it is, I have to imagine that this is slightly slower than Stompy, right? It's not a rip-roaring, super fast aggro deck.
No, I can't imagine it is. I don't mean to rush, but I think we should go ahead and move on to the next one, just in the time constraint.
Oh, certainly. So the next one, this is kind of the good stuff model of White Weenie. So starting it off, we've got Benevolent Bodyguard. It's 1/1 for white. You can sacrifice it to give a creature you control protection from the color of your choice till end of turn. We've got 3 copies like Haitian Javelineers. It's white for a 1/1. Enters the battlefield with Javelin counter on it. You can tap this guy and remove it, and it deals 1 damage to target creature or player. Then 4 copies of Core Skyfisher. You know him, you love him. It's 1 white for a 2/3 flyer. When it enters the battlefield, return a creature to its own. You can return a permanent. Excuse me. You control to its owner's hand. We've got Leonin Skyhunter, which I had forgotten was a common. It's white for a 2/2 with flying, which is admittedly a pretty good rate. We've got 4 copies Squadron Hawk, 4 Suture Priest main deck, and 4 Razor Golems. Razor Golem is 6 generic mana for a 3/4 with affinity for planes and vigilance. So let's take
talk about
that Suture Priest.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Go ahead.
So Suture Priest is 1 white for a 1/2 cleric. Again, on the topic of weird creature types, it's just a cleric. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may gain 1 life. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, you may have that player lose 1 life. Okay, I'll bite. What do you think this is here for?
I think it's just here for utility, honestly. I know that sounds kind of dumb. But it is Soul Sister in that you gain the life, but it also drains. So it could be good for getting in a couple last points of damage. As we go through the list, you'll notice there are no pump spells in this version. So I imagine it's there just so that you can get off a few extra points of damage when needed.
So I guess my question here would be, would you rather run the 4 copies of this or 4 copies of something like Guardian's Pledge? Just from having not played this list, which of those appeals to you more?
Honestly, Suture Priest, we don't really have the same critical mass of creatures that the other deck has, and we're playing Razor Golem, which is not helped by that card at all.
That is true. I hadn't thought about the Razor Golem thing because Guardian's Pledge is only the white creatures. I also want to talk a little bit about this spell base. So we've got 4 copies of Mana Tithe, which is a white for counter target spell unless its controller pays 1 generic mana. How do you feel about this?
Mike, I'm going to give you a hot take. This deck is mono white Delver.
No. It's just not.
Not buying it. All right,
no,
all right.
I'm not biting. I'm not taking this bait. So.
Mana Tithe is a color shifted force spike. I think that this deck would, at the very least, like to think it plays like Delver, which may be why that's an inclusion. The 3 copies of Unmake I think are good. Unmake, despite its very restrictive mana cost, is probably one of the best removal spells we have. Just triple white for exiling a creature is pretty good. It kind of, obviously it's only good in like very specific archetypes, but it's a strong card. I think Mana Tithe probably has a lot of gotcha factor to it. It's not a very highly played card in the format, so people aren't really going to be playing around it. You can probably nab a few key spells that way.
I've got to also feel that the reason we're seeing 4 Mana Tithes is just the lack of a lot of card draw in this deck. So just upping the chances that you'll see it in your opener, because as the game goes on, Mana Tithe tends to get less and less effective. And I definitely do think it is a slight gotcha card because your opponent can play around it once they see that you've got it.
Right.
And I don't know. I can see the situations where it would be really good, where you get to nab a key spell from your opponent and not let them resolve their threat, or fight a counter war out of nowhere. I'm just a little suspect that it's actually really good, if that makes sense. Just it doesn't feel like it's going to be an absolute game breaker most of the time, but it will help you get some level of advantage. We've also got 3 copies of Bone Splitter, a generic mana for an equipment, equip creatures +2/+0, and equips for 1, and 3 copies of Journey to Nowhere. So we've got a little bit more main deck removal, specifically main deck removal that exiles, and we've also got a great way to get value out of these creatures in terms of making them actually quite threatening. I think Bone Splitter is, if we're going to the hot take alley, Bone Splitter is just Rancor for non-green decks.
Sure. I mean, that's a pretty good hot take.
I mean, it pumps a creature by 2 power, and if the creature dies, you can pay 1 to put it back out there again. I think Bone Splitter is great in these types of decks just because it does give you a little bit of reach, and slapping one of these on like a core Skyfisher is no joke. Like, a 4 power flyer is gonna make short work of most decks that don't just have 1/1s in the air that they can chump with forever. And frankly, there aren't a lot of those decks out there in the wild. What are your feelings on those last 2, Bone Splitter and Journey? Obviously, Journey I think is pretty good, but are you a fan of Bone Splitter in these types of lists?
I think you kind of have to run it in this specific list because it's a great, like you said, it's like Green Rancor. It's a great way of punching through extra damage. No, it's not as good as Rancor, but it's the closest thing a deck like this is going to get, and it turns your late game creatures into very real threats.
Yeah.
Your creatures in the late game, I should say.
Yeah, it gives you a mana sink. I think it just fits in this type of strategy where you have a lot of built-in evasion, and you also have Razor Golem, which in this deck, in case it wasn't clear, this is a 3 mana 3/4 with Vigilance most of the time, if not cheaper. But on turn 3, you can very realistically just play this as a 2/3 with Vigilance. If you've got a Bone Splitter, the next turn you can suit it up and be swinging in with a Vigilant 5/4. That is actually reasonably scary for a good chunk of decks. That outclasses a lot of creatures in Pauper. So I think Bone Splitter is actually pretty key here. I'm still not on board with the Suture Priest in this particular list, but I could be convinced if I saw it in action and it really put in work. Let's just see. Oh, it's got some very interesting sideboard tech, though. I don't know if you've taken a moment to look at Benevolent Unicorn.
Why don't you tell our listeners what that is? I did see that, and I kind of had to look at it twice. It's really weird.
So Benevolent Unicorn is 1 and white for a 1/2. Whenever a spell assigns damage to a creature or player, that damage is reduced by 1.
Is this Electrickery tech?
So it is both Electrickery tech and also tech against burn.
That's true. I didn't think about burn. Yeah, it helps nullify burn.
So with this, burn is a deck made up of 3 damage for 1 mana spells for the most part. This effectively means that your opponent has to hit 3 more bolts to take you down to 0. Because 7 bolts to kill someone normally, but if they just turn into shocks because of this thing, you've effectively knocked that number up to 10. So 3 more burn spells is not an insignificant ask of burns in some cases. I actually kind of dig this as tech for that matchup, and the fact that it hoses Electrickery, it even hoses Evencar's Justice on a bunch of these creatures. I don't know. I think that's pretty relevant personally.
I think so too. I wonder if Cop Red is just straight up better against burn, but I do think it's interesting.
Against burn, I would think Circle of Protection is most of the time just better. This does have the Suture Priest to help you, gain back a little bit of life by playing out creatures. But Cop Red does not let you save it doesn't make your own creatures more resilient against red removal. Right. Which I do think is one of the interesting upsides of the Unicorn.
This deck is even really particularly soft to electricity. I mean, I guess it might be. You got Benevolent Bodyguards, Acacian, Javelineer, Squadron Hawk, and Suture Priest all as 1/1, so maybe it is, but it's not like the token deck where they're trying to swarm the board, they run out of cards, you trickery them, and they lose on the spot. Like, this deck can at least rebuild pretty, a little bit better, I think.
I mean, maybe there's an argument for this showing up in that other white deck, but we also see in the sideboard one of the sort of evergreen cards in white decks, Prismatic Strands. I still think this is just one of the best white sideboard cards in terms of combating faster aggressive decks.
Right. It does require you to actually be playing white creatures, though, which is its downside. For those at home, Prismatic Strands is 2 and a white. Prevent all damage that sources of the color of your choice would deal this turn. Flashback, tap an untapped white creature you control. So yeah, it's a very strong card. I have 2 of them in my Boros deck.
Yeah, and these have even seen play main deck in some lists, but I think having them on the board here makes sense. All right, do you want to introduce us to this soldiers deck, because this one's a bit of a stretch. This one's going back a little bit, but it's still neat.
This was one of the ones that someone emailed us to cover. We got a 1 of Gideon's Lawkeeper. W gets you a 1/1 W and tap target creature. Good way of getting blockers or big creatures down. 4 copies Thraven Inspector, who would have guessed. 4 copies Core Skyfisher. And then 4 copies of Loyal Cathar, which is actually, I'm surprised didn't show up in our white good stuff list. WW gets you a 2/2 with Vigilance. When Loyal Cathar dies, return it to your battlefield transformed under your control to begin the next instep. It turns into Unhallowed Cathar, which is a 2/1 zombie that can't block. So it's resistant to dying. We've also got 4 copies of Veteran Armorer. We've already been over that one. And then 4 copies of Veteran Armor Smith, which is WW for a 2/3. Other soldier creatures you control get +1. So it's very similar to Veteran Armorer. They're both soldiers. They both cost 2. This one's a little stronger. It's a 2/3, but its buff is a little bit more restrictive. So that's really why we're only playing it here in the soldier list. We have 3 copies of Porcelain Legionnaire, which is essentially 2 mana for a 3/1 with First Strike. But in reality, it's a 2 and a W for Phyrexian mana. We've got 1 copy Veteran Swordsmith. 2 and a W gets you a 3/2. Other soldier creatures you control get +1/+0. So we've got a very strong theme here of pumping your soldiers. And then we've got 4 copies of Gem Palm Avenger. So Gem Palm Avenger is maybe the reason to be in soldiers. It's 5 and a white, so a 6 mana for a 3/5 soldier. But its strength is that it has a cycling ability. So for cycling, for 2 and a white, you draw a card. And then when you cycle Gem Palm Avenger, soldier creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain First Strike until end of turn. So this is this deck's Guardian's Pledge. It only counts for soldiers, though, which all of our creatures are. But it also gives them First Strike, and you get to draw a card. So for 3 mana, you get +1/+1, draw a card, and First Strike. So I think that's actually a pretty good rate.
Yeah, and this is an interesting one. So the Gem Palm cycle was actually a split rarity cycle. I think we got the black and the white ones. The black one, Gem Palm Polluter, shows up whenever Tribal Zombies shows up, because likewise, it's just a very, very powerful effect. This is effectively an uncounterable mass pump spell that also draws you a card. That is nothing to sneeze at. I don't know if you're ever casting this thing, because paying 6 mana for a 3/5 is pretty miserable in almost every situation I could imagine. I can't think of any deck where I'd want to pay that rate for that body on a creature, but I'm sure it gets played sometimes. Also, I really love the fact that Porcelain Legionnaire is in this deck, and I didn't know until today that it was a soldier. Actually, no, I did know that. I just forgot. But I like the good old Toilet Knight.
He's a good one. It's also uncounterable.
What?
You can't counter cycling.
Oh yeah. I thought I'd mention that it's uncounterable. But yeah, you there's no stifle.
You probably did. I was looking at something else. Sorry. As far as our spells go, we have 2 copies Unified Strike. Exile. Well, I'll read the original text. Remove target attacking creature from the game if its power is less than or equal to the number of soldiers in play for W. So doing its best Swords to Plowshares impression there. 4 copies Raise the Alarm. You get soldiers out of the deal. and then 2 copies Guardian's Pledge. So we do still have a couple more Anthem effects. Again, we also have 2 copies of Bone Splitter. Again, just turns your threats very powerful. You know, it makes your creatures more powerful in the late game. And then we've got 4 copies Journey to Nowhere. So I do like the spell, artifact, and enchantment package here in this deck, and this is definitely the deck with the most creature synergy that we've seen.
Yeah. So Unified Strike I do really like because, you know, you did kind of joke about it doing its best Swords to Plowshares impression. It's not a half bad Swords to Plowshares impression. A lot of the creatures that you'd care about removing, since this is an aggro deck, are creatures that could potentially race with you. So being able to remove big or efficient creatures relatively easily is nice. This just, you know, especially against decks that are looking to pump their things mid-combat, you can potentially get the blowout by doing it in response to a pump spell. I don't know. I really dig Unified Strike, and this is the only deck in the format that gets to play it. Also, I do want to talk for a second. I have to imagine that suiting up Porcelain Legionnaire with Bone Splitter is just the absolute nuts in this, right?
So yeah, which one with Bone Splitter?
Porcelain Legionnaire.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because then you're just like, block me if you can. 3-1 is already pretty big.
Yeah, like a 3-1 First Strike already wins combat a decent chunk of the time. Making it a 5-1 with First Strike is just absurd. Like that thing is just going to beat in. Almost nothing in this format can profitably block that thing. So I've got to imagine this thing is just a beast a lot of the time if it can get a piece of equipment on it. Now, interestingly, even the one artifact creature we've gotten here still gets pumped by Guardian's Pledge. So
yep, it's a white creature. It's also a soldier. It receives all the benefits of the rest of the deck.
Yeah, the only thing in this deck that's not getting hit by Guardian's Pledge is a flipped Loyal Cathar. Now, do you think that Loyal Cathar has a place in the deck we discussed previously, the sort of good stuff style of White Weenie?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. In fact, I would even hazard to say that you could probably play it over a card like Leonin Skyhunter or maybe the Suture Priests. It is a pretty common card for White Weenie decks to play, so I guess I am a little surprised that other deck wasn't playing it now that we've seen it here. It just has a lot of value and it's hard to get rid of. It's like Young Wolf.
Yeah. It's kind of a Young Wolf, but the front half of it is very good. Like a 2/2 Vigilance for 2 is just fine, and the fact that you do get another use out of it if your opponent can remove it is really nice. And looking at the sideboard here, we're seeing a lot of the usual suspects, you know, some amount of life gain, some amount of answers to affinity, prismatic strands. This one's running a 1 of Guardian of the Guild Pact. I'm kind of shocked that that's in the sideboard. I kind of wouldn't mind that as a... I guess it's not a soldier, is it? That's the only
no,
thing
it's not.
Sucks.
But I wonder what you bring it in against.
I
mean, there are some decks that just can't beat it. Like, I guess you could bring it against like Boros, but then it's so slow. Yeah, I'm not really sure what you would bring in Guardian in against. I mean, there are a lot of decks where I can think, oh, Guardian would be good, but in that case, why not just have one in the main?
I'd posit that against Stompy, Guardian probably puts in work, just because a lot of their creatures, even wearing Rancor, have 2 toughness, and this thing just soaks up damage all day. I have to imagine that it's probably not bad against certain draws from elves if they're all in on like an Elvish Vanguard or something like that. The catch is, because you're such a removal light deck, you're never going to be able to force them into that line of play. So yeah, I'm not really sure where Guardian fits into this. I do really like Guardian as a curve topper in these White Weenie strategies, just for the fact that it is so difficult for some decks to interact with. There's a handful of things in the format that can actually even interact with this thing, let alone interact profitably. All right. Do we want to move on to our last and arguably spiciest list we've got here?
Yeah, let's go ahead. It's the Cyborgs list.
Yep. So Cyborgs is a pretty popular kind of fan favorite with a lot of Pauper players. Cyborgs is a white weenie deck that seeks to leverage, as Adrian mentioned earlier, a artifact sub-theme in it. And it does this by playing a lot of Metalcraft stuff, a couple of affinity things, and just kind of really going in on that angle of the deck. So we've got things like Ardent Recruit, which is a 1/1 for a white, but it has Metalcraft. As long as you have 3 or more artifacts, it gets +2/+2. So this is a 1 mana 3/3, a decent chunk of the time in this deck. Auriok Sunchaser is 1 and white for a 1/1 with 1 and white for a 1/1. As long as you control 3 or more artifacts, it gets +2/+2 and has flying. So it's a 2 mana 3/3 flyer. Court Homunculus is 1 white for a 1/1, and it gets +1/+1 as long as you control another artifact. You don't even have to hit that threshold of 3. We've got Frogmite, 4 mana 2/2 with affinity for artifacts. Glinthawk, 1 mana 2/2 with flying. When it enters the battlefield, sacrifice it unless you return an artifact you controlled to its owner's hand. We've got 4 copies Core Skyfisher, 4 copies Porcelain Legionnaire, and 4 copies of Thraben Inspector.
Those cards are good, it turns out.
Yeah, so pretty much everything here, barring Core Skyfisher, cares about or interacts with artifacts in a meaningful way. We've got Recruit, Sunchaser, Court Homunculus, all get better when you have artifacts. Glinthawk is just undercosted and requires you to have an artifact. Frogmite is a free 2/2 a good chunk of the time, I've got to imagine.
So some of the interaction is you can pick back up the Frogmite and just recast it for free. Or skipping ahead a little, there's Tooth of Chisgora, which has flash. So you can pick that up and then replay it and tap it again. Which is pretty interesting. It has affinity and flash. Well, we can get there in a moment. But there are ways to also use Glinthawk for advantage instead of just as like an undercosted 2/2.
Yeah, I mean, I think the main draw is the fact that it's an undercosted 2/2, but this deck is not without. We're not like full on like Ichor Wellspringing here, but it does have other uses within this deck besides just being a 1 mana 2/2 flyer. Speaking of those artifacts, we've got 4 copies of Bone Splitter, the full play set. Just because this is an aggressive deck, and I've got to imagine. So wait, like, how's this grab you for an opener? Turn 1, Ancient Den, Ardent Recruit. Turn 2, Darksteel Citadel. Cast Bone Splitter, equip Bone Splitter, swing for 5.
Nasty.
Yeah, like
That's how that sounds to me.
Like this is a deck that gets very, very, very explosive starts sometimes, and then it has 2 copies of Flare Husk. I've got to imagine this is kind of Edict protection, right? And also the fact that you can strap this onto stuff after the germ dies, and also just contributes to your Metalcraft count. And then finally, we've got the spicy include Tooth of Chisgoria. It's a 3 mana artifact. It has affinity for artifacts. It's got flash, and it taps to give target creature +1/+0 until end of turn. So why don't you tell people at home a little bit of what they can do with this in this list?
So I did mention kind of I think the big one where you can pick it back up with Glinthawk and recast it at instant speed and get 2 pumps out of it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really it. I mean, you can also pick it back up with a Core Skyfisher.
Yeah, and just the fact that this thing does represent, if you're swinging in with more creatures than your opponent controls, it just represents a free ping in. So, and the fact that it does have flash means it can kind of come out of nowhere when you cast it. So I do like that. And then in terms of lands, we've got 4 Ancient Dens, 4 Darksteel Citadels, and then 10 Plains. So it's, that's not super surprising to me, just playing the maximum amount of artifact lands that would be possible in this type of list. And there's nothing super, super spicy in the sideboard that we haven't seen before. It is running a few copies of Guardian. Again, you got all these pump effects that Guardian wears pretty well. So we've known about this deck for some time. What are your feelings here on Cyborgs as a list?
I think it's an interesting strategy. I don't know if it's any better than, say, the Soldiers list. I think you open yourself up to a little bit more in the artifact destruction. You also kind of play sort of nonsense cards like Tooth of Chiscoria, but you do get to play Bone Splitter, which, as we've discussed, is very strong. You do get to play Porcelain Legionnaire, Core Skyfisher, Thraben Inspector, and have their synergies count a little bit more. So I do like the deck. I think that it's, I don't know. I played against this deck the other night at F&M with Boros, and it was very easy to beat, but I have so much removal. So I think that this deck kind of falls apart in that regard. And I think one thing that we can say about all these decks is, they don't really have any draw power, which is kind of unfortunate. So I did lose a game to it, though. I will say that, because if they're able to, like you mentioned, have like a nut draw, and your example was one of the many I think they can have. They can also just go like, Frogmite, Sun Chaser, Ardent Recruit or whatever, and like that's a pretty good start. Like they can beat down very, very well. So on the slower decks, they probably catch them on the back foot. But if you have access to a lot of spot removal, I think this deck in particular sort of falls apart a little bit more than the other ones, because a lot of the times the artifacts are relying on the other creature-based artifacts in order to do well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it definitely does. So, all right. We've talked about these 4 lists. I want your take as someone who's put in time with the deck. Is Boros Monarch, or I guess the versions preceding the Monarch version of the deck, like, is Kuldotha Boros in essence a white weenie deck, even if it's playing red cards?
I would say that the newer list is even more sort of like that. Like, sure, you're dirtly, but you have access to all the red removal and you're rebuying the artifacts. I guess it's not really white weenie. You're right. I think, yeah, I guess you could consider the older, like the tokens version, I guess you consider more white weenie, because sure, you're getting value off these 2-drop artifacts, but in the end, you're winning with a bunch of 1/1s and pumps, right? So I could see that argument. I think that what sets Boros apart from the mono white list is just the fact that it does have access to the red removal. And I guess the Monarch, isn't shabby either. But yeah, I guess if you're going to compare them, like the old school list, yeah, I would say it's sort of like white weenie.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because as I mentioned, we've never seen a huge success from a mono white deck, and the fact that Boros Monarch is still one of the top decks in the format, and definitely one of the decks to beat. I think when we talked earlier about that list, even all the way back from 1996, one of the things that you immediately pointed out was it gets to run 4 Swords to Plowshares. And I think at the end of the day, one of the things holding mono white decks back is just the fact that they don't have a very efficient targeted removal spell. And the removal spells that they do play tend to be either sorcery speed or a little on the janky side of things.
Or really expensive, like Unmake.
Your game has started.
Yeah, like it's just never... It feels like it doesn't have good answers to cheap, efficient threats like Delver, because trading your 3-mana Unmake for a 1-mana 3/2 in the air is something you probably have to do in some situations, but at the same time, it's not something you're really excited to do.
And I think one other thing that we could discuss about one of the drawbacks of these lists. Well, let me tell you a pro first. One of the pros, these lists are all around, the most expensive ones, like just over $10. Like they're cheap on Moto. So if you wanted to pick up a solid, monocolored deck in the format, play some games, teach your girlfriend some Magic or boyfriend or whatever, I think that these decks are solid pickups. They're cheap. They're relatively cheap in paper as well. The mechanics aren't really that complicated. But I think that is sort of maybe also their downfall. A lot of conversations in Pauper center principally around card advantage, only because the top decks in the format are so darn good at making it. So for a deck to not have really any source of card advantage is kind of rough. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like even in terms of 2-for-1s here, there's not that much. And white does certain things really, really well in our format. Like that Soldiers deck, we talked about this a little in the pre-show. It could be running Elite Vanguard at this point. Like it could just be running a 2-mana 2/1. And even then, I'm not looking at it and going, wow, that makes this deck leagues better. It's just like, oh yeah, I guess that does probably replace some of these cards. Doesn't do anything, but like it is very efficient. So do you think that barring an efficient piece of interaction in the form of something like, I guess, for lack of a better example, something similar to swords.
I think
is that what it's going to take?
I think so. I think that, in the other deck we were talking about, most of the threats were passable, but really, yeah, the removal is what really, really shined. Obviously, having access to creature lands is a whole other ball game. But yeah, I think having access to good, cheap, instant removal is strong. Maybe that's also why the Soldiers list is so appealing, because Defiant Strike looks so good when you're like, oh, exile a creature for W. Sure, they have to be attacking, but that's the best Swords impression we really got.
Yeah, and I think even if we got something that was similar to Journey to Nowhere but had flash on it, like I don't think we'll ever see that, because that's a very, very powerful effect at common. But I think that's really the thing that bites it. Like, Journey in a lot of matchups, especially game 1, a lot of the time is just exile a creature for 2. And if you have core Skyfishers, you can rebuy it if a more pressing threat shows up. So if we had some way of getting one of these effects at instant speed, I would feel a lot better about these decks. The catch is, if it costs like 3 or more, I start to lose interest there. Like, I guess I want exactly Seal Away from Dominaria at common. I think that's my happy spot.
That's what it takes.
All right, so yeah, I've never really gotten into these white decks, and I think at the end of the day, my lack of interest in them is the fact that they don't do aggro better than a deck like Stompy does, in my opinion, and they also don't they don't do anything more mid-rangey than these. I did for a while try out a version of the traditional mono white aggro deck where the top end of the curve was Renegade Freighter, and that was actually pretty sweet. But I don't know. I think these decks are kind of internally in limbo until they get a cheap, efficient answer to opposing threats that can be played at instant speed. I think that's the thing holding these back, and if that ever happens, I could see them doing a little bit better, but I'm not sure they'd ever supplant something like Monarch, which kind of just is a better deck than a lot of these, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess that's the accurate little summation of my takeaway on this super archetype as a whole. Is there anything else you think that people should sort of have as a take home about these decks?
I'll say what I said a second ago. I think the mechanics are solid. If you want to get into the format, it's relatively cheap. If you want to teach some folks how to play the game or get them into the format, you have recognizable strategies, turn things sideways and pump them. So I think the best out of the bunch is the Soldiers list. It's got a neat little tribal synergy, and I don't know. I give it a try. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. At the end of the day, there's not much to say about these decks because they're just trying to play efficient threats and turn them sideways. It's not to deride that as something that is not a skilled game plan or whatever.
I think that you can. I think you can learn a lot about combat from decks like this.
Yeah,
which is important. A very, very, very important skill. I think people forget about it a lot.
Yeah, it's just at the end of the day, the best way to play these decks makes it look like it's a series of simple decisions, but in reality, it's a decent amount of like getting good draws, and also just knowing when to apply pressure and when not to, when to ease off, when to not play into removal, that sort of stuff. But at the end of the day, when they're played effectively, it does just look like someone's just playing things out, turning them sideways, and that's it.
You saying you got to know when to hold them and know when to fold them?
Yes. Kenny Rogers? Is that Kenny Rogers? Kenny Loggins?
Someone.
I don't know. Some guy with a beard, I feel like. But yeah, check out Mono White decks. We will be linking all 4 of these deck lists, plus that old championship deck that back in the day took it all the way. But if you have any ideas for like a different take on mono white, we'd love to hear it and revisit this. So yeah, reach out to us if you've got one of those hanging around. Adrian, you want to take us out of the show?
Yep. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. This podcast is brought to the support of our patrons. Consider supporting us if you like the show. Patron shout-out today goes out to Samurai Warrior 876. Thank you so much for the support. You can check Lila's video in the description of this podcast for details on where to find us. We'd like to remind you if you're listening to this on a platform with reviews, they're always appreciated because they boost our visibility. If you've got a deck list or idea for a topic, you can contact us either via our website or by emailing us directly at colorcommentary@gmail.com. Special thanks to my LGS Pets Games and Mike's LGS JP Comics. And of course, L, who does our theme song Quantitative. You can find that and other great tracks over at soundcloud.net/ELLELLELL. Till next week, this is Adrian and Mike, and we are signing off for Color Commentary.
Welcome, everyone, to Color Commentary. We are your pauper commentators, Michael Petchik and Adrian Gonzalez. How's it going, Adrian?
Good. How are you?
Doing all right. Wrapping up my program in a week and hopefully getting a job after that and going out and being a productive member of society once again.
Yay.
Yeah.
Congrats, dude.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited. Got one last project to get through, and then it's clear sailing from there on out. Real excited. So let's take care of the upkeep, and we can get into our discussion for today. First off, I want to tell you that we are brought to you in part by Original Magic Art. Original Magic Art is a wonderful website. They have all sorts of tokens, dice bags, playmats, and art prints featuring magic art and art from the rest of the world as a whole. And they do some genuinely really cool stuff. They recently had a charity playmat on there of Mark Rosewater's illustrated card, Look at Me, I'm the DCI. But there's been all sorts of really, really cool stuff that they have put out through the years. And they have an affiliate program, and we're part of it. So we're going to let you know that if you want to get some tokens, get some playmats, get some dice bags, whatever it is that they sell, and you want to improve the aesthetic quality of your play space, you can get it at 5% off. We have a affiliate code with them. It's commentary, all caps, spelled as it is in the name of this podcast. Again, that is commentary, all caps, spelled as it is in the name of the podcast, and you will get 5% off your order. They give us a little bit of a kickback, so you're helping keep the lights on here, and you're also helping yourself get a little bit of money off your order. Adrian, what do you got for us?
Well, as you all may well know, we are on Patreon. For just $1 an episode, you too can hear the full show, including our pre- and post shows, and you get access to our Patreon-exclusive Discord channel. We're currently in the middle of our Patreon drive. We're looking to get up to $100 an episode. We're currently sitting at 93. Once we hit that sweet 100 mark, Mike and I will be financially obligated to produce set reviews with visual representation.
Peace Strider and Pierce Strider both got downshifted. They're both 4 mana 3/3s, artifact creatures, constructs, the pair of them. And Peace Strider, when it enters the battlefield, you gain 3. And when Pierce Strider enters the battlefield, target opponent loses 3.
Your game has started.
So our thinking was, again, maybe you could abuse it in a Flicker type strategy that appears, obviously Ghostly Flicker is busted. All 3 cards we talked about are all like hey, maybe this would be good with Ghostly Flicker, which is something you have to consider with every kind of ETB effect, I feel like, in Pauper. What I like about them is that they're colorless. I think Pierce Strider is obviously a little bit better, but I don't even know if it's really that good. It was just an interesting thought because it's a colorless card, so it could go very easily into like Tron or something.
Yeah, it does represent a certain amount of like offensive power, but by and large, I feel like this set was mostly a miss. There's a lot of like interesting cards that will be fun to play with in this limited format, but might not exactly be great fits for constructed formats, and I think that's fine. Like, not every set is built with our format in mind, and there's also like one of the key mechanics from this set is assist, which is another player can help pay for the generic mana in a card's cost, and that's really cool in a set where like if you and your teammate in a two-headed giant match, if one of you doesn't have a play on one turn, you can kind of like pool your mana, literally, and cast out like a 6-drop on turn 3. Now, most of these cards as a result are a little bit overcosted, and none of them are impactful enough where even in Tron they'd be enjoyable. So it just kind of doesn't line up well with what most decks are trying to do in Pauper. So, bit of a miss for us, but it does actually look like a blast to draft.
Yes.
I don't know if you're planning to actually try to draft this thing, but I definitely am.
I think you're supposed to be playing it as sealed. I don't know if you're supposed to actually draft it.
I thought the whole point of it was that you drafted and it was like this weird draft where like the teams sat next to one another.
The pre-release stuff is definitely sealed, and each team gets 6 packs.
Ooh, that seems very slim.
Yeah, it's weird. I will probably not really a limited player. We might do something at work. So maybe in that instance, I could do something.
It seems like a really fun set, and I'll definitely at least give it a shot. So there's also a ton of really awesome reprints for other formats, but it just didn't strike the mark with us. So instead, it's the day of a spoiler release. We're gonna actually go back in time a little bit. We're gonna do a set review of notable cards out of Rise of the Eldrazi.
Yes, and Mike, you actually are the one who selected this. This is a patron topic. Thank you, Thurbin Valiant. But Mike, you actually selected this set, and why don't you tell our listeners why Rise of the Eldrazi in particular?
So a while back, I did a quick thing just for my own self-interest where I ran through most of the Magic sets as a whole and tried to determine which ones gave the most to Pauper. And Rise of the Eldrazi is surprisingly relevant to this day. There's a bunch of cards that were introduced in this set, which I still think are super, super relevant to the format. And the moment I heard this idea, I was immediately in my head, even though I didn't say it at the time, I was like, we got to do Rise. We've got to do Rise. Rise is a very, very powerful set in terms of what it was doing. It was heralded as a fan favorite in terms of its limited format, and it brought a bunch of really powerful mechanics with it. So we're going to kind of hit some of the high points, and I think we could also hit some of the things that we either wish were cool, wish were better, or, you know, have always kind of been on the fringe of things. But let's start things off strong here. We've got one of the mechanics that was introduced in this set, Totem Armor, on Hyena Umbra. So Hyena Umbra is 1 white for an enchantment aura. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 in its first strike, and has Totem Armor. If enchanted creature would be destroyed, instead remove all damage from it and destroy this aura. So,
are you only doing the notables, Mike? Sorry.
I think we'll do the notables for the first pass, and if there's anything else that we want to discuss.
Okay, gotcha. Because I didn't know. Sorry, my mistake. I definitely have something I want to talk about at the end. But yes, Hyena Umbra, very, very good card. Played in mono white strategies, played in Boggles. I'm thinking specifically of Heroic. I think I saw Deluxe running it in his mono white Infect deck. Just generally a strong card in mono white. The first strike is always relevant, and then the Totem Armor I think is really what seals the deal.
Yeah, and Totem Armor is one of those weird ones where it protects you against certain removal very well, and against other removal it's just very ineffective, because this doesn't protect against edict effects, and it also does not protect against -X/-X effects, because it does just remove all the damage. It doesn't reset the power and toughness. So if something's a 0/0, it's still going to be a 0/0 after this totem armor trigger goes off.
Well, I don't even think the trigger actually happens when a creature gets minus and dies. It actually doesn't get destroyed. It ceases to exist as a state-based effect. So
Right.
I think that might be the interaction why that doesn't work too.
Well, point being, this is a staple in Boggles decks and has been pretty much as long as this card's been around, and I don't see this going anywhere anytime soon. It's just really, really solid for the mana cost.
Yeah.
Next up, Lone Missionary. How about you tell us a little bit about this card?
Yeah, sure. 1 and a white gets you a 2/1, whatever. When a Lone Missionary enters the battlefield, you gain 4 life. So that's really the strength of this card. It's played in, I think the most places I've seen is like Monarch type strategies where they can continuously rebuy the Lone Missionary. It's great against burn, great against red decks just in general. It's great, the 2 power makes it a great defensive creature against decks like Red Deck Wins or Stompy. And then the 4 life normally can just push you just out of reach. That's 1.5, 1 1/3 of a burn spell for the red deck.
Yeah.
So it's a strong effect stapled onto a good body at a low cost.
Yeah, it's one of those things where life gain effects are in general not great when they're just life gain, but if you staple them onto a body or have an additional effect, a la something like Pulsar Marasa, where it's just enough for it to matter, and
I mean,
also just in terms of the amount of life here, like 4 life, as you mentioned, is more than 1 burn spell.
I don't think I'm going too much on a limb here when I say this is basically Pauper Snapcaster Mage.
That is, sir. I think at this point you've fully reached the point of absurdity. I think that's one not even I can get behind.
No, I mean,
it is a 2/1
that goes out.
for 2.
That's a joke for the fans. No, I don't really think so. It's a 2/1 for 2 that does something when it enters the battlefield, and there the similarities end. It's not even a human.
Yeah.
Or a wizard.
Next up, we've got Soul's Attendant, which is 1 white for a 1/1. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield, you may gain 1 life. This is
the other sister in Soul Sisters.
Yeah, and I've got to admit, like, that's a deck that does not see the play that it used to. It used to be that you'd see white token strategies from time to time, and
well, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, what were you gonna say?
I've seen Souls. Yeah, the white token strategy certainly. Triplicate Spirits, Raise the Alarm, etc., etc. But Soul's Attendant and the other one, the first one,
Soul Warden.
Soul Warden are both in Rallygond.
Oh, that's true, because it does help you kind of stave off the more aggressive matchups just by...
Yeah, and the infinite life gain and the infinite tokens. Yeah, it's there.
Yeah, this is just a solid performer. It's seen probably more play in other formats, namely Modern, where Soul Sisters is a thing.
And actually very, very annoying.
Yeah, turns out gaining a bunch of life in a format that wants to go fast doesn't always let the other player do what they want. But yeah, Soul's Attendant, solid inclusion. Definitely something that I have played in the past and will probably play again in the future. How about you let us know about Deprive, Adrian?
Sure. Deprive is basically counterspell. Bit of a downside. Blue gets you an instant as an additional cost to cast Deprive or turn a land you control to its owner's hand, counter target spell. And I will say this is generally counterspell 5 and 6 for blue decks that want it. Or mostly just 5, maybe 6.
Yeah, it's generally when you've maxed out on counterspells and don't have a good way to fuel Logic Knot, is how I generally view this. Like, if I'm really hurting for another 2 mana counter anything, if I've got any sort of like self-mill thing going on, I'm definitely reaching for Logic Knots over this, but in the average deck, this is just really solid, especially if you have utility lands to back it up. Like the blue-black Angler lists could occasionally run Bajuka Bogs, so you could use this to rebuy them if necessary. I don't know. I like Deprive. It is definitely a utility card, but it is one of the only recent 2 mana counter anything counter spells.
And also the art on it is beautiful.
Yeah, I've always liked this. What is that, an elf?
I think it's an elf, and it looks like a paint balloon just exploded on them, and they look shocked. It's great.
All right. So yeah, Deprive, play it if you need that extra counter spell. That's exactly what this card does, and it excels at it. Next up, we've got Distortion Strike, which I don't think sees that much play anymore.
Yeah, it was really like a blue-green infect card. For those at home, it's you for sorcery. Target creature gets +1/+0 until end of turn and is unblockable, and it has a rebound. So it's a way of getting in your infect creature twice.
I mean, this has this ever. I can't remember seeing this ever in Kiln Fiend decks, but this feels like something that would go there as well.
I think in the Kiln Fiend deck, you're generally trying to kill on the same turn, and the ones that they play, like Shadow Rift, actually draw you a card so that you can hopefully then cast another spell in the same turn. So it wouldn't surprise me if that's the reason this card doesn't see play as much in that deck.
I guess that's pretty fair, yeah.
Whereas the +1 and the unblockable and the rebound, I think might be a little bit more relevant and infect. I don't know. Maybe I'm just making stuff up because, yeah.
All right. Let's move on to a card that is deeply, deeply relevant to this format and has been for years now. Mnemonic Wall, 4 and a blue for an 0/4 defender. When it enters the battlefield, return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. This is pretty much at this point an auto-include in Tron decks.
Yeah,
Your
as
game
you all
has
know,
started.
in fact, we talked about it even earlier on the show. It's the other half, one of the other halves of the Flicker combo. You can keep rebuying Ghostly Flicker to your hand. It was a big player in the Drake deck, and I think ever since then, people have sort of realized what a powerful effect this is. And so, yeah, people play it in Tron alongside Ghostly Flicker, or really just for value. It's just a strong card in general in the big mana decks.
Yeah, and the fact that it leaves the 0/4 body, even if you're not getting up to Flicker shenanigans, it does provide a pretty solid blocker for dorky attackers. Where do you fall on this versus Archaeomancer?
I think Archaeomancer was better, and specifically Drake, because it was able to come down earlier. But I like Mnemonic Wall better overall. And I will go ahead and say the Theros Mnemonic Wall is my favorite Mnemonic Wall.
Ooh, we're gonna have to diverge on that one, buddy. I love the original art of this. I don't know what the hell it's supposed to be besides a wall, but I've always really liked it.
It looks like a waterfall or air. I'm not sure. I like the Theros one.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Opinions are just that, opinions.
One stroke for all folks, Mike.
That's not at all how the saying goes. How about you tell me a little bit about Narcolepsy?
Yeah, Narcolepsy is a sideboard card that doesn't really see a lot of play anymore. I don't even think in Mono Blue Delver, which is where people used to play it. It's 1 of the blue, enchant creature. At the beginning of each upkeep, if enchanted creature's untapped, tap it. And it was a form of removal for that deck, which, lacks hard removal. I think Vapor Snag is way more on vogue these days.
And also, for what it's worth, Cursor Change does exist, which is the same card as this, except its mana cost is 1 and a hybrid Azorius.
Well, I think it also goes ahead and taps it.
Does it actually? I thought it was still the beginning of upkeep tap it. But
Let's look it up.
The other notable thing about Cursor Chains is, since it does occasionally matter, Cursor Chains can enchant a...
No, it's the exact same.
It is the exact same.
Guardian of the Guild Pact. Yeah.
It enchants Guardian of the Guild Pact. It also, I don't know, potentially, I guess against mono white heroic, you could get them into a situation where you can pop this on something and then they have to... Oh, no, they can still give it pro blue. Never mind. The niche case here is Guardian of the Guild Pact can get tapped down by that, whereas Narcolepsy cannot even be cast targeting it. But yeah, this is sideboard tech of days gone by. Next up, another card that is still fairly relevant, although he's being pushed out a little bit by the new hotness. Seagate Oracle, 2 and a blue for a 1/3. When it enters the battlefield, look at the top 2 cards of your library. 1 goes to your hand, the other goes to the bottom of the library. So it has a sleight of hand on ETP.
Mike and I dumbly thought that Augur of Bolas would never replace this card because this one can get you a land.
Yeah,
and I think in some decks that does matter, but Augur of Bolas is obviously the more played card.
Yeah, I think Augur fit well into Delver strategies because they were already playing a high density of instants and sorceries, and as a result, it basically almost always hit, and that's a deck that doesn't need to hit that many lands to begin with, and they weren't even playing Seagate Oracle to begin with. They literally just got in when Augur was printed on having this like 1/3 dork on the ground. And I still like Seagate Oracle for what it's worth. It's just the fact that digging 3 cards, being able to hit something that is relevant, it's just very good. That extra card is a lot more important than I think we realized at the time. So Seagate Oracle, I will still play you occasionally in Tron, but sorry, buddy. Your days of being the number 1/3 in blue, I think, are past at this point.
Up next, we've got Bloodthrone Vampire. A 1 and a black gets you a 1/1 sack a creature. Bloodthrone Vampire gets +2/+2 till end of turn. So it's a smaller Nantuko Husk, but it costs less, and so sometimes you might see it in sacrifice strategies in between Husk and its mini reprints and Carrion Feeder.
All right, I've got to ask you, what is in your mind the best of the 3 options for Nantuko Husk reprints? Is it the Husk, is it Vampire Aristocrat, or is it Phyrexian Ghoul?
It's the Husk.
Yeah, I love that creepy little bug guy, but
yeah, I like Spooky Bug Man.
Yeah, so Bloodthrone Vampire is nice because it represents a smaller initial cost. It does have the downside of dying to slightly more removal, but most of the time, the stuff that would kill Husk, if it's targeted removal, is just as likely to kill Bloodthrone Vampire. It does have the disadvantage of it would have to eat 2 things in order to survive a Lightning Bolt versus the 1 that a Husk would have to eat. But it does represent a much cheaper play, which means you can have, like the potential for a better curve out in like a black-green Aristocrat style deck where you're going Blister Pod into this, into some sort of 3-drop that matters. So you can kind of, I think it's very curve dependent as to whether or not you want this or one of the 3-drop 2/2 versions of it. And I don't think either of them is necessarily wrong. It just matters as to what the rest of your curve is looking like.
Sure.
I don't know. I like it. I dig the art. Next up, we've got Shrivel. Shrivel is actually technically kind of a reprint. Shrivel is 1 and a black for a sorcery. All creatures get -1/-1 until end of turn. This is just nausea, but I guess with the printing of Rise of the Eldrazi, people could run a full 8 of them if they really wanted to. This card's still good. I personally think the art on Shrivel is better than all the arts for nausea, but
no, that's not true. What about Stinky Toots? Stinky Fairy Toots?
It's not good art. It's old
great.
art.
You're right. It's great art. Mike's wrong.
All right.
Also,
all right.
seventh edition foil nausea.
No, don't do this to me. We're moving on. Next up is Flame Slash. Flame Slash is a red for a sorcery. It deals 4 damage to target creature. This has seen a good chunk of play in the Morosatron list. I am waiting for the day where we get an instant speed version of this.
Scred.
I mean, Scred exists. It does have a deck building constraint. I would just love,
barely, but yeah.
I mean, so the decks that are playing Flame Slash just straight up do not have the option of playing Scred. Like, how is a Tron deck ever going to hit more than a handful of snow-covered bases?
Okay, you're right.
I'm just saying. Like,
you're right.
I think it would be nice at some point when Wizards decides it's okay to get a 1-mana instant speed 4 damage.
It's an archetype.
Yeah, I think this is one of the most powerful cards out of the set in terms of sheer velocity. This thing gets out of hand very quickly. It
Your game
automatically
has
turns on
started.
the Ferocious on Temur Battle Rage just by casting it and targeting this thing. I've won a decent chunk of games with Kiln Fiend, and I adore this card. It's such a tiny little design, and this thing just wrecks people so quickly. Now, we've seen prowess in the time since the printing of this come into the main It's an evergreen mechanic now. Prowess shows up in pretty much every set, and it's become one of Blue's big mechanics. So I guess, do you think we're ever going to see at Common another thing like Kiln Fiend that really is much more aggressive and less of kind of a side like tempo thing where, oh, I can get +1/+1 by playing my combat tricks?
I think you're more likely to get a +2/+0 instead of a +3/+0 these days.
You just think that this is a little bit too powerful for these days?
I think 3's a little high these days.
All right, that's fair enough. I mean, how many years ago was Dragon's Maze at this point? Probably more than I want to think about.
Yeah, don't think about it. Up next, we've got... Sorry, I'm looking through to make sure I didn't miss one. I'm going to go with Stagger Shock. Stagger Shock is 2 in a red. It deals 2 damage to target creature, player, and it is rebound at instant speed. Not really a highly played card in the format, but definitely a fun little, I guess, a utility card if you're playing a deck that wants this, but not really on vogue in the format right at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, so Stagger Shock has had its role in controlling decks where you want 2 shocks for the price of, I guess, 3, but the fact that this thing is instant speed and you can kind of, if your opponent plays out two toughness creatures and you have the mana up, you can shock 1 at end of turn and then shock 1 on your upkeep. And I think sort of the built-in 2-for-1 and the fact that if you kill their only thing, you can still point the other half at the face, I think really makes this a pretty powerful card. It's never amazing, but it's always solid, and it feels nice to get the 2-for-1, right?
Right.
I just haven't seen this played in long enough where I'm not sure if it still technically has a home, but I've got fond memories of it, and I love it in low power cubes. I actually think this is an absolutely stupid card in Pauper cubes. All right, let's move on to green. So, Ancient Stirrings. Let's talk about this thing. This thing is good enough in Modern that I've seen people on Twitter ranting about it, how it should be banned every time Lantern Control wins a GP or something. Or Tron, yeah. So, Ancient Stirrings is a green for a sorcery. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may then reveal a colorless card from among them, put it into your hand, then put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. So... Tell me where this has seen play in Pauper.
Mostly, I feel like mostly mono green Tron or just Tron in general still. Use it to find Tron pieces. Use it to find Crusher. It's a good card for digging to many of the colorless cards that Tron has. Does regular Tron play it? Am I just crazy? I feel like I'm coming up.
I mean, the old Rugtron decks where you played like the stars and the spheres. I think you had enough density, but
it does. Yeah, on Goldfish, it doesn't look like the more, the newer Tron lists are really playing it. I've been playing it a lot in the mono green Tron list, which is why I had a moment of confusion there. Which is a fun deck to play around with, but definitely very strong there because you're playing like all the spheres and stars and all that stuff, which I think that the Denrovitron or Rossitron lists have kind of, that package is not as popular as it used to be.
Yeah, those decks are trying to enact a slightly longer game plan. So Stirrings is good as just like, I need to dig to something now. 5 cards is a lot to look at. And this thing, it's good. It's good. How about you take this this next little
Yeah. Next up, we got Aura Gnarlid. A 2 and a green gets you with 2/2. Creatures with power less than Aura Gnarlid's power can't block it, and Aura Gnarlid gets +1/+1 for each aura on the battlefield. So really played in Boggles. Yeah. It's good in Boggles as another threat that doesn't have to actually have the auras on it.
Yeah, and that whole can't be chump blocked ability really makes this thing a huge pain to deal with. It kind of asks that you have non-red removal for it yesterday, and if you don't, it's just really miserable to deal with this thing because the odds, when it comes down, most of the time it's big enough that you're just never blocking it. So I don't like this card, Adrian. I'm going to be honest with you. It's not that I think it's bad. I just hate losing to this thing.
Because it dies to removal?
Not because it dies to removal, because it requires removal immediately and can't be chump blocked. I'm a big fan of playing control decks, and I like being able to chump block big threats and buy myself a little bit of time. This thing just goes, all right, do you have a Doomblade or similar? If not, I'm just going to beat your head in with an 8/8.
Salty Mike is salty. You got it.
Just because I don't like a thing doesn't mean that it's actually bad. It's just I have lost a frustrating amount of games to this thing.
That's fair. I'll give you that.
All right. Next up in green, Nest Invader. Nest Invader is a 2-mana 2/2, 1 in a green, and it's an Eldrazi drone. And when it comes into the battlefield, you put a 0/1 Eldrazi spawn creature token onto the battlefield that has sacrificed this creature. Add 1 colorless to your mana pool. So this is still pretty popular in Stompy builds, right?
Yeah, because you can go turn 2 Burning Tree Emissary, Nest Invader, or even just Burning Tree Emissary, Nest Invader. Plus, it has built-in Edict protection. It's like, yeah, it has Edict protection. You can chain it off of Burning Tree Emissary, and then if you sacrifice the token, you can trigger your own Morbid for Hunger, the Howl Pack. So as a whole, just not like the strongest card, but plays well in the deck.
Yeah, just the fact that this gives you a way to potentially stall like an opposing attacker. Again, as you mentioned, turning on Hunger the Howl Pack, just the fact that it soaks up an Edict, it just gives you just enough stuff that's just difficult enough for the decks that would like to prey upon Stompy to deal with. It's a really elegantly designed card, because nothing about this is super pushed. It's just good. It's just slightly above curve enough that it works. This thing can also ramp you. Like, let's not forget that Stompy is usually somewhere in the 17 to 18 lands realm. Sometimes you do need to cast those Elephant Guides. So just having a way to ramp up a little bit is nice. It's a nice little upside. I mean, I guess you could also technically chain these things together for a green apiece. Maybe do like a pseudo Burning Tree Emissary impression.
Stop.
A thought.
Up next, we've got Overgrown Battlement. 1 in a green. Defender. Tap. Add green to your mana pool for each creature with Defender you control. This is part of the Freed from the Real combo deck, isn't it?
It was at one point. Again, Freed from the Real is one of those decks that so rarely shows up that there are a handful of configurations of it.
And is this also not in the Wonder Walls deck?
Oh, the Defender Tribal deck?
Yeah.
Yeah, it certainly can be. It's the place I have the fondest memories of playing this actually is not even this format. I used to play a decent chunk of Peasant online with people in Europe, and there was a deck that got to play this and Cloudpost and Eldrazi, and it was real fun.
Sounds fun.
Yeah, no, it was basically a limited deck for this format with the inclusion of Cloudpost. So it was silly, but it was fun. So Overgrown Battlement, 1 in a green for an 0/4. It's a wall. It's got Defender, and it taps out a green to your mana pool for each creature with Defender you control. I believe
that's your opinion.
So I've seen this thing get out of hand. The catch is most of the decks where it gets out of hand do powerful nothing with it, because I've definitely seen like Overgrown Battlement into what is that thing, the Mirage one, the one with the guy lost in the woods, the one with -0 -1 counters.
It's right on the tip of my tongue. It's not Wall of Wood.
Wall of Vines.
God, what is that card? It's using it played in Pod too.
Yeah, like I know exactly what this card is. I just cannot for the life of me come up with the name. But
hold on, I'm gonna get it. Why can I not? Wall of Roots. I was like, why can I not remember this?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry.
You could do this, and then like next turn play Wall of Roots, and this thing taps for 2. You can put a counter on Wall of Roots, play a 3-drop. Maybe, I don't know, Axebane Guardian, and then on your next turn you have access to 7 mana out of your walls alone. So it is
go crazy.
Yeah, you can go crazy. The catch is you're not not going crazy with stuff that's really ending the game. I think the next one we should talk about is Snake Umbra, which is 2 green for an enchantment aura. Enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has whenever this creature deals damage to an opponent, you may draw a card. It also has totem armor. And I have definitely seen this played in Boggles as like a one of. I think it's neat.
It's pretty saucy when you can draw cards.
Yeah. The fact that this is a green Ophidian effect that also kind of protects the thing that it's attached to is neat.
And you still get to do your damage.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's right. I always forget that Ophidian actually didn't deal damage when it drew a card. And
that's bad.
Yeah, it is bad. You know that card's actually common?
Yes, I did actually. I was thinking, yeah, I knew, but it's just not very good.
It's not very good, but you can play Ophidian in Pauper. That is a thing you can do.
I'm going to skip down quite a bit here. And my next card that I want to talk about is Prophetic Prism. Yes, this is the first set with Prophetic Prism, which is played in Tron and Boros, two of what we consider to be pillars in the format. And it just goes into so many decks. Affinity plays it. It can go into like weird random 3-color decks. It's basically, one of the best mana fixers we have in the format.
Yeah, wow. The fact that this thing draws a card is really big. Just the fact that you get to fix your mana for 2 mana. So you pay 2 mana into this thing, and you draw a card. So already it's better than cycling abilities on most cards. On top of that, it's going to fix your mana for the rest of the time it stays in play. Tron really needs that as support.
It's going to up your affinity count. It's going to be able to get picked back up later by a bird. Ups your metalcraft count. Like it just does so many things. It's I think we used to joke when Mike went here, if you're playing Prophetic Prism on turn 2, you're going to win the game. And it turns out that that's true more often than not.
Yeah, this thing just represents so many little aspects. So many little aspects of this card add up to something that is really, really underwhelming when you first glance at it, but really vital to a lot of decks and how they actually go about enacting their game plan. And I think this is probably one of the better cards in the format in terms of the width of decks that it sees play in, because
it's a workhorse.
Yeah. Like this sees play in Affinity, which is an aggro combo deck. It sees play in the ultimate mid-range deck of the format, Boros Monarch, and it sees play in one of the dirtiest control decks in the format, Tron. Like across all those, this card is still good. It's still really solid, and this is where it came from. Also, gonna have to bother you for another art question here, since this thing's been reprinted a bunch. Where do you fall on the art for Prophetic Prism? Which is your fave?
This one's my favorite. I have 2 in foil from the original printing. I have a Japanese foil from M25, but I own a playset of the Kaladesh foils, which is what I'm currently running in my deck, and I do not like the Gatecrash one. What do you think?
I think I'm there with you. I have 2 playsets of this. One playset is all the Kaladesh ones, and the other one is a split playset of this and the Gatecrash ones. I think the Gatecrash is the weakest.
It's still fine art. I'm just not a big fan of it. I like the rainbow on this one a lot.
The Gatecrash art kind of suffered from the whole reprinted online mocks effect, where
it's the hand and that's about it.
It's a hand holding a rock. That's what it is.
Yeah. I mean, that's what this is too. But he's got the face in there.
Well, I think what I'm specifically like, the specific target of my displeasement here is the shot of a disembodied hand in front of a scene from the current plane we're on, holding a rock.
Now
that's
look.
The thing I don't like.
So the first one, the flavor text, is okay. It's the explorer who found it got a bad deal when he sold it. He merely got rich. But if you go to Gatecrash, the flavor text says, to understand Ravnica, one must first understand how each guild contributes to its stability. By itself, not that meaningful. If you go to Kaladesh, though, it says to understand Kaladesh, one must first understand how Aether and Invention flow together through the Great Aether cycle. So I do like how they've sort of thematically tied them together in that way.
Well, I mean, it's there in the name. It's a prophetic prism. It gives you a gift of sight.
I just like how the later 2 flavor texts are very much alike.
Yeah, it is a neat little note. Let's move on to some other neat colorless cards. I'm gonna take Ulamog's Crusher, which is an 8 generic mana 8/8. Already, that is a fine creature in Limited.
Passes the vanilla test.
Yeah, passes the vanilla test, goes in any deck in Limited that hopes to get to 8 mana. This was at Common in its original printing, and here's the thing. 8/8 for 8 is not making waves in our format. What is making waves in our format is the fact that it also has stapled onto it Annihilator 1. And for those unfamiliar, let me tell you about would you argue this is the least fun mechanic in Magic?
The least fun? Annihilator?
It's got to be up there.
I mean, sure. I think land destruction might be the least fun.
I'm talking just in terms of keyworded abilities that were a major part of a set.
Okay, sure. It's frustrating to... I mean, it's very on theme for the Eldrazi, but there's a reason that Emrakul is one of the best finishers in the game, right? Like for decks that are going that route, because Annihilator 6 is just like almost unbeatable, and then getting hit for 15 on top of it. Annihilator 2, not so bad, but if you have to chump block this guy, you're losing 3 permanents basically. So... yeah, it's up there for being unfun. I think losing permanents in general that are not creatures is unfun in Magic. So I agree to a certain extent.
Yeah, and the fact that this thing just kind of, on top of being a very, very quick clock if you can get this thing established, the fact that it just kind of requires you to answer it, or it's just going to chip away at not just your creatures, but your lands, any enchantments you've got out, any artifacts.
But I do like it from a flavor standpoint. The Eldrazi. Eldritch Horrors.
Yeah, the Eldritch Horrors consuming worlds. And I do really like the fact that this thing has found a handful of homes. It's played in Tron pretty frequently as a finisher.
It's basically... I was sort of joking earlier about the Snapcaster Mage. This is our format's Emrakul, right? Like, you expect to resolve one of these. Sure, it doesn't have protection from... spells, and it lacks a bunch of stuff that actually makes Emrakul like super, super, super powerful, but you're looking to close out the game with a huge beater that's also going to make your opponent lose their board.
Yeah, this thing is nutty. And I also love the fact that this is part of our only Reanimator deck in the format, where it can leave your opponent with 0 permanents on turn 2 if you have the absolute nut hand.
I mean, yeah, this card is good.
Yeah. Why don't you take the last card that was new to Pauper in this set that I'm not sure a good chunk of our listeners are aware this is where it started.
It's Evolving Wilds. Yep.
Yeah.
Evolving Wilds is from Rise of the Eldrazi. Sacrifice it, search for a basic land card, put on the battlefield tapped, shuffle your library. This is like one of our only 2 fetch lands. Sure, you can count Terramorphic Expanse, but does anyone actually play 8 fetches in their deck? That's not Ash Barrens in this.
I was going to say there's decks that play 4 of this and 4 Ash Barrens, but Terramorphic Expanse is definitely, I think, the less played of the fetches, and I have no idea why.
There's only one art.
I guess that's true. There are some very nice arts that have been done for Evolving Wilds over the year, and no offense to Steve Belladine, but I think this is the least interesting of them.
I have the F&M promos. Out of the set ones, I think my favorite is Khans.
Dragons, right? The flowing lava.
Yeah, that one's pretty good.
I'm a big fan of the arena promo that they just did. The one for I think it was Rivals Arena.
That one's really nice too. There's a bunch of promos. There's also a promo from Dragons as well. That's not great, but it's a promo.
Oh yeah, that's the non-foil one from the pre-release, right?
Yeah. But I agree with you that this one with the trees is kind of one of the not as exciting ones.
All right, so those are cards from this set, which are still seeing play today or have historical notability. Do you have any cards out of this set that were new in this set that you think deserve a little bit more love, would be really cool to play?
Level up not being a thing is kind of weird. I mean, I get that it's slow. I guess that was a mechanic really only destined for Limited, but none of the level up cards are good in Pauper. They're just so slow.
They're really slow, and here's the thing. If it doesn't work here when we have stuff like, for example, Champion's Drake, which is 1 and a blue for 1/1 with flying, and it gets +3/+3 as long as you control a creature with 3 or more level
Well,
counters on it.
in limited, it was a strong strategy. You had Venerable Teacher at common. You had a bunch of good level ups at common. Like white blue level up was a deck in limited.
Yeah, it's so slow, and while most of the ones at common do require colorless, there's just much more powerful things that, for example, Tron could be doing than just sitting around trying to get, for example, with Caravan Escort, trying to get and this is absolutely absurd, a 9-mana 5/5 with First Strike.
I agree with you.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's a very neat mechanic, and the card frame is really funky. If you've never seen one before, look them up. They're very, very strange. It's just one of those things that never really clicked. And I think the only one of these, there's what is it? Student of Warfare sees cube play, and so does the Jiraga Tree Speaker and Enclave Cryptologist from time to time. But the ones at common are just, in my opinion, a little underwhelming for what you're paying into them. I want to talk about, for a second, Dawnglare Invoker. I don't know if you're familiar with this. It's
No.
2 and a white for a 2/1 with flying, and it has an ability for 8 generic mana. Tap all creatures target player controls. I don't know. I think it's neat.
It could maybe do stuff.
Not really. It's just a neat card.
Yeah, it's a neat card.
What else is there in the set? There's a handful of other the Umbras, the auras with totem armor. None of the rest of them are really that powerful. We've got stuff like Eel Umbra, which is 1 and a blue, enchanted creature gets +1/+1, totem armor, but it also has flash, so you can kind of flash it in response to a removal spell, I guess, or flash it in to like deal an extra point of damage out of nowhere. But it's really not that impressive.
This set is old enough that most of the cards on this that we've gone over like are really the ones that get played, and like the set's old enough that I don't know if, barring a huge new card in the format, it's hard to think that some of these are going to actually get played. Is what I'm getting at.
Yeah. I think one of the ones that I've seen people try to make work is Shared Discovery. You familiar?
What does that one do? Tell me.
1 blue for sorcery. Draw 3 cards. You want to know what the downside is?
Yes.
As an additional cost to cast Shared Discovery, tap and brace yourself here so you don't fall out of your chair. 4 untapped creatures you control.
It's a lot of creatures, Mike. It's a lot of creatures.
I mean, how do you feel about 5 mana Convoke Ancestral?
I mean, it's not even really Ancestral, right? Ancestral's an instant.
Yeah, it's one of those cards where I think people see it and it looks very much like Ancestral on the front, but the moment you actually try to play this thing, like I've seen decks that try to make use of this with like token strategies where it's like, all right, just gonna turbo out a bunch of tokens and then.
Well, the problem is with the blue deck, right? Like, what token generators are you using? I guess you'd have to be blue-white.
Yeah, you end up being blue-white or even blue-red because you got all the goblin token producers. So, like, people have tried it. I don't think this card is actually good. It just kind of, like, the dream of, I don't know, having 5 mana, casting, like, Goblin, Mog War Marshal, this thing, tapping down all the stuff that just ETB'd is, like, the dream. I don't know. It's not great, if we're being completely honest. But and then a lot of the other stuff in this is as per most sets, it's kind of filler. It's not the sort of thing that really impacts the format in a heavy way. I do want to mention Raid Bombardment. Again, are you familiar with this one?
Yes, and I don't think I feel like I've heard people say they play it, but I've never actually seen it in a deck. Tell the people at home what it does, but I do know what it is.
So it's 2 and a red for an enchantment. Whenever a creature you control with power 2 or less attacks, it deals 1 damage to the defending player. So the idea here is that you can attack, quote, through your opponent's blockers. And I've definitely seen this as something people have played in Goblins because you just go wide.
I think typically you're going to see Impact Trimmers in Pauper, though.
Yeah, that is the thing. Impact Tremors, I believe, is a mana cheaper, and it's on ETB.
Right, so you don't even have to attack. Impact Tremors is also a much newer card. Impact Tremors is from Dragons, so I mean, for a long time, I'm sure people did play Raid Bombardment, but yeah, I think Impact Tremors in this day and age is where you would want to be, where you prefer to be.
Yeah, just a little too low impact. But I think when we first talked about this before we started recording today, Adrian was not completely sold on the concept of this, but Rise has some pretty high quality cards for the time.
I was worried that we were just going to talk about a set where we were like, well, there were a couple cards in this set. We all know which ones were good. And instead it's like, no, this set was deep enough that we really did get to talk about a lot of the cards. So I am okay with that.
I think the big thing about Rise is it was designed as a format to be a format with a lot of build and then a lot of top end and stuff to do along the way. And I think that lent it to kind of having good ramp targets and good early game plays that helped solidify your position. So I think this was one of those ones where the themes for this set kind of naturally shook out to benefit Pauper in a unique way. And they printed some really silly stuff at common. Like, I cannot imagine Ulamog's Crusher being printed as a common these days. And I don't know. This is a set that I did not play through. I've heard that the limited environment is exquisite.
Your game has started.
Yeah, I've heard it's very good.
I don't know.
A little before my time though.
I thought we'd try something a little different. This was a suggestion that I saw and immediately was like, yeah, we can make this happen. So definitely thank you, Thraven Valiant, for the suggestion. I think this was real fun, and I'm sure there's other sets that we could do this with, but Rise was definitely the one that sprung to mind immediately, just as, you know, this is a set with a high density of stuff that's pretty pertinent even to this day.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Look at me, wows.
Oh God, not again. All right, Adrian, we've been talking about this set for a while. Do you wanna take us out of the show?
Sure. Everyone, thanks for listening to us today. This podcast is brought to you by the support of our patrons, especially Ask Dr. Bear, our patron shout-out for the day. Consider supporting us if you like the show. Check with this video the description of this podcast for details on where to find us. We'd like to remind you, if you're listening to this on our platform's reviews, they're always appreciated because they boost our visibility. If you've got a deck list or an idea for a topic, you can contact us either via our website or you can email us directly at colorcommentary@gmail.com. Special thanks to my LGS, Pat's Games, and Mike's LGS, JP Comics, and of course, L. You can find our theme song Quantitative and other great tracks over at his SoundCloud, which is soundcloud.net/ELLELLELL. So next week, this is Adrian and Mike, and we are signing off for Color Commentary.
Welcome everyone to Color Commentary. We're your Pauper commentators, Michael Petchick and Adrian Gonzalez. How's it going, Adrian?
You know, good.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. We had thunderstorms up here. They were quite tumultuous.
Oh yeah, I saw something about Northeast slammed with another storm.
Yeah, it really cleared up today, but like yesterday, in the less than a city block that it takes me to get from the train to my house, I was so soaked that I had to change literally everything I was wearing once I got inside. It was that bad. But cleared up, and looks like we're smooth sailing from here on out. You got anything for the folks? You want to hop right into the upkeep?
No, we had a delayed episode this week, so I'm trying to remember if I talked about F&M.
You
last
didn't?
Week. I don't think I did. And by the time this episode comes out, the folks listening it'll actually been another F&M since then. Since then, I went 3-1. I lost to one of my friends in the first round. I definitely punted, and it was against Tribe Combo. Round 2, I beat one of my other friends. He was on a counters based deck that was abusing Thrumming Bird and Modular and
what
other cards like that. Yeah, I was playing Boros, so it was I it's just so much removal. Round 3, I played against Cyborgs, Again,
Okay.
I'm on Boros, so that felt pretty good. And then round 5, I played against Banishing Nat combo, no sideboard. But that means that my Banishing Nat opponent was 2-1, just like me. So he was doing well.
I mean, if you don't interact with that thing, like it does just go infinite. So
Yeah.
I guess I could see that. All right. So upkeep. First off, to start things off, we are brought to you in part by Original Magic Art. Original Magic Art has all sorts of cool tokens, dice bags, playmats, and art prints from Magic's history as well as the history of the rest of the world at large. They are always getting new products in, and they make some really, really tremendous stuff. And we happen to be affiliates of them. So if you are interested in getting some nice stuff for your play space, you know, maybe up in your token game for an FNM or what have you, they have great stuff for that. And as affiliates, we've got an affiliate code. If you want to receive 5% off your next order, you can enter the code commentary, all caps, spelled as it is in the name of this podcast, and you'll receive 5% off, and we get a little bit of a kickback. So you help keep the lights on here. You get a little bit of money off your order. Again, code is commentary, all caps, spelled as it is in the name of this show. What do you have for us, Adrian?
So we've got a Patreon for just $1 an episode. You too can hear the full show, including our pre and post shows, and you get access to our patron exclusive Discord channel. The other thing we're doing right now is we're doing a patron drive, I guess you could call it. So if by June 16th or so, I think we actually calculate another day. I think it's actually like the 14th or something of June. Basically by my birthday, if we have $100 an episode, 2 things will happen. The first is that we will be obligated to give you video content during our set reviews, and the other thing that we're sort of throwing in to sweeten the deal is if we can close that gap. We actually got 1 patron since the last episode, so thank you, whoever you are. I guess we could go check the log, but if we get the last $10, we will be giving away a playmat to one of our patrons. So head on down. It's a fun time. So yeah, episode time.
Yeah. One last note on the Patreon. Patron Luke actually has one of his dogs just had puppies. So if nothing else, there are some very, very good dog photos that get shared in that Discord. So I was
wondering why there were so many sandwiches on there.
They do look a little bit like very funny colored loaves of bread right now. They're very, very fresh puppies.
All right. I'm a cat person, so let's get into the enough pleasantries, Mike. Time for the deck tech.
Enough pleasantries. We're not really friends outside the show. People came here for that deep, incisive Pauper content.
Did you know that Penn and Teller are not friends?
Yeah. Plenty of famous duos aren't actually friends. We are, but like most of them aren't. Business and friendship not mixing and all that. But anyway, we're getting off on a tangent here. Today, in order to bring you that insightful, super relevant, incredibly cutting edge Pauper content, we're talking about a mono blue Tron.
Mike, I can't help but feel like maybe you were being sarcastic a moment ago there.
Well, I mean, it's definitely an off the beaten path deck, and you've definitely played more modern. I know there's a mono blue Tron deck there, and is that deck good?
I mean, it's not the best Tron deck, especially not now. But yeah, back in the day, there was, I think it was more blue-white, but it was base blue. And because I think it played like timely reinforcements. And what it wanted to do is Mindslaver lock you out of the game with Mindslaver, which is where you can control your opponent's turn by sacrificing it, basically. And it would play Academy runes that you could return Mindslaver to the top of your library, thus creating a loop where you always control your opponent's turn and they can no longer do anything, and you beat them that way. So that deck's pretty sweet. I think what we're really looking at this deck is that you could put Tron into basically anything, and it makes the deck way better.
Yeah, and it kind of lets you skirt around, like, when you look at a card and you go, wow, if this was like 2 mana cheaper, I would totally play this. Tron doesn't care. Tron is just going over the top to a point that is ludicrous. And this deck is kind of seeking to do just that in a very different way. And a lot of the usual suspects are here, but so let's go through this creature base. So we got 4 copies Seagate Oracle, 2 in a blue, 1/3. When it enters the battlefield, you look at the top 2 cards of your library. One goes to your hand, the other goes to the bottom of your library. So you got a sleight of hand attached to a 1/3. This is being played in this over Augur of Bolus. And I'm looking at this list. Is 17 spells really not enough to play Augur?
I'm thinking, Mike.
Maybe it's not.
I feel like in Tron there's a concession given to Seagate Oracle because sometimes you use it to hit Tron lands. I know that that's not ideal, turn 3 without Tron, but I could see a sequence where you go turn 1 island, turn 2 Tron land, turn 3 Tron land, Seagate Oracle, hope to get the last Tron land.
Yeah, I definitely think that it has value in this deck with that axis, and I guess like most of the Tron decks don't run Augur either, so I could definitely see Seagate having its place here. Next up, we have 2 copies of Mnemonic Wall, which is 4 and a blue for a wall. It's a 0/4 with Defender, and it has an enter the battlefield ability that is when Mnemonic Wall enters the battlefield, return target instant or sorcery from your... You may return target instant or sorcery from your graveyard to your hand. So I think we can guess what we're trying to do with this deck. We're trying to, play some instants and sorceries.
Yar, flicker me walls.
Oh no, we went.
That's a meme you haven't heard in a long time.
I legitimately think it has been well over a year since I had to hear those words.
That was a joke from back in the Drake era when you would flicker 2 walls, and Mike made a Drake pirate meme. I don't know. It was a good time.
Yeah, I mean it wasn't, but like we managed to struggle through and find the comedy and the tragedy. But yeah, this is pretty common in a lot of Tron decks nowadays. But here we're doing something a little different with it. Next we have 4 copies Muldrifter, 4 and a blue. It's a 2/2 with flying, and when it enters the battlefield, you draw 2 cards. You can also evoke it, which means you pay 2 and a blue, and when it enters the battlefield, you sacrifice it. This card's good. If you can cast it, you should play it. I really don't know what to say since we talk about a lot of Muldrifter decks. You got anything else?
Muldrifter's a good card, and I think that it's a 2/2 flyer for 4 and a blue.
Yeah, that's about it. Now, this deck's also running Muldrifter's older, much uglier sibling, Wretched Gryff. Wretched Gryff is 7 generic mana, or it has Emerge, which is an ability from Shadows over Innistrad block. And what you do is Emerge has a mana cost. In this case, it's 5 and a blue. You may cast this spell by sacrificing your creature and paying the Emerge cost reduced by that creature's converted mana cost. So, and in this case, it's a 3/4 with flying, and when you cast it, you draw a card. So whether or not your opponent, whether or not it actually resolves.
I propose we start calling it Ratchet Gryff.
Ratchet Gryff. Okay, fair enough.
It's so ratchet.
I was really expecting a Muldrifter pun here, but I just couldn't come up with one. But in this deck, what, like you're popping a Seagate Oracle to get a 3 mana draw card 3/4 flyer? I think
pretty
I'm
good
okay
in Tron. You can play it with Tron mana only, which is nice.
That is true. Like, this is technically a colorless threat. You can just pay it for quote 3 mana, even though it does cost 7. So I guess it does. It's basically a modal card where both of those modes are pretty accessible to you. All right, so we've got this creature base, lots of card draw, lots of kind of slightly more defensive leaning bodies and evasive bodies. Let's get into these spells. We're gonna start things off with 4 of you know it, you love it, the Pauper Remand Memory Lapse. Memory Lapse is 2 and a blue for an instant. Counter target spell. Put that spell on top of its owner's library.
I want to note real fast. This is the only counter spell in the deck, and I'm a little surprised the deck is not playing Condescend, which is a mainstay of other Tron lists.
I was gonna say, just for the fact that it's like most of the time not much more difficult to cast, and it does let you scry.
It's a strong card no matter what point of the game. So I am interested to see Memory Lapse. I am interested that Memory Lapse was chosen over Condescend, because I think Condescend is a better spell in the deck.
So I guess Memory Lapse always is going to counter the spell no matter what, but I do like the Scry 2, and I have like like there is the line sometimes in Tron where like you just need the scry, so you fire off a an undersized condescend, you know, make your opponent tap out and get your scry too. But yeah, I could see a definite argument for condescend. Now this deck is a little less focused on, you know, absolutely a turn 3 Tron and trying to get that online like absolutely must do. But I don't know. I can see the argument for memory lapse. I could also see the argument for just running something like Prohibit, or another one of the 1 and a blue counter spells. But in this case, it's memory lapse. Next up, we have Compulsive Research, which is 2 and a blue for a sorcery. Target player draws 3 cards, and then that player discards 2 cards unless they discard a land. So this is both a very aggressive draw spell and also, I guess, a win condition here?
Yes, you can technically mill your opponent with a lock of, well, not a lock, with a loop of Ghostly Flicker, Mnemonic Wall, and Compulsive Research. You can mill out your opponent. I imagine on Moto that is horrendous, but in paper is probably fine.
Well, the thing is, there's no way to go infinite with this in this deck. Like, I can imagine, since this is a fairly defensive deck, and we will... Although I guess the rest of the cards in this entire deck kind of go against that. But regardless, there's 2 Ghostly Flickers, so you can at least recur this to like cycle through your deck pretty efficiently. But yeah, so 2 Ghostly Flickers, 2 in a blue for an instant. Choose up to 2 target artifacts. Or actually, no, I never actually read the card. It's not up to. It's exactly 2. Exile 2 artifacts, creatures, and or lands you control. Return those cards to the battlefield under your control. So this is going to be flickering Evoked Mulldrifters. It's going to be flickering Mnemonic Walls. It's going to be flickering not Wretched Gryff, but probably Seagate Oracle. This is kind of a staple of any deck that plays some number of Mnemonic Walls. You just want like one in there because sometimes you just get like disgusting value out of it. So I'm not really surprised to see this here.
Yeah, me either.
Next up, and here's where things start to get weird. We've got 2 copies of Time Ebb. Without looking at it, Adrian, do you know what Time Ebb does?
I played Portal. I know what Time Ebb does. It puts a creature on top of its owner's library. For
2 and a blue at sorcery speed. So this is where the deck's sort of main plan is coming a little bit together. So it's got Time Ebb. It's also got Temporal Eddy, you know, good friend of the show, Eddie. It's 2 and a blue. It's 2 and 2 blue. Put target creature or land on top of its owner's library. So a little bit more expensive, a little bit more utility. Keep your opponent off the mana, and then it wraps this up with 4 copies of Gone Missing, which is 4 and a blue for a sorcery. Put target permanent on top of its owner's library, and then you investigate. So, Adrian, have you ever been on the receiving end of a capsize lock?
I have indeed, Mike. It is not fun.
Have you ever been on the receiving end of a Chittering Rats lock?
That one is a little bit rarer, but yes.
Have you ever been on I can't say I've ever had this happen to me, but have you ever been locked out of the game by a Gone Missing? Because
no.
I think that's what this deck wants to do.
It's sort of a little column A and a little column B.
It's So for those a little bit less familiar with the format, if you have 2 Mnemonic Walls and a Ghostly Flicker, you can cast Ghostly Flicker targeting the 2 Mnemonic Walls. When they come back to the battlefield, you're going to have 2 triggers. One of them is going to return Ghostly Flicker. The other one is going to return another instant or sorcery. So what you can do with this is you can set up, you know, if your opponent's a creature deck, like say Stompy, you could just keep playing Time Ebb and just lock them out of ever actually playing the game, beat them to death with a 2/2 in the air. If they're playing a less aggressive deck, you could perhaps go for the more ambitious Gone Missing, where you're just going to start capsize locking them, except it goes to the top of their library instead of their hand. And eventually they're just not going to have a hand, and they're not going to be able to really do anything.
Sounds great.
Yeah, seems miserable, Adrian. That said, like, if it works, I guess. in the artifacts, we've got 4 copies Expedition Map. It's a 1 generic mana artifact. You can pay 2 generic, sacrifice it, search your library for a land, reveal it, put it into your hand, shuffle your library.
Pretty normal.
Yeah. Tron decks usually play some number of these, and 4 is a little on the high side, but, you know, you've got like a curve that starts at 2 and goes up to 7. I can totally see this. Then we've got 1 copy of Is It Signet.
In this deck, it's really the red doesn't matter at all.
Yeah.
It's blue and a red. You know, blue and 1. It's a bounce land basically, but you have to pay for it.
Yeah, and I mean, like, plenty of times, like, bounce lands go pretty much unused, and with this one, you're not taking up a land drop to do it. So, for example, you know, if you've got Tron active, you tap your tower. Oh wait, this doesn't even bounce it. Jesus, yeah, no, like, you can just pay 2 mana for this, and it gives you another mana out of it. So, this is a 2 mana rock. Now, I do want to ask you the important question. Would you play something else over Is It Signet? Because, spoiler alert, there's no red anywhere in this deck.
Maybe Mind Stone. I know that it gets you 1 less mana and it's, you know, colorless. So maybe the blue source is a little bit more important than I'm currently thinking. But the ability to draw a card late game seems pretty good.
I mean, you could also. I'm trying to think of the other 2 mana rocks in our format. I guess we have. Oh, what is that thing called? Oh God, I'm blanking on this.
I don't know, Mike.
There is one other one, the Guardian Idol. I guess you could technically play.
I'd forgotten about Guardian Idol. Enters the battlefield tapped though. I guess most of the time you don't use it on the same turn.
There's also Star Compass, which is 2 mana rock, enters tapped, add to your mana pool 1 mana of any color. Oh, that a basic land you control could produce. Never mind. That's a bad card for this. Yeah, so I think I think the main thing here is just it ramps you, and then we've got 4 copies of Prophetic Prism, 2 generic for an artifact. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card. 1 generic and tap, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. So filtering, basically, and card draw. Staple of Tron decks everywhere. For the lands, we've got 1 copy of Common Fengraft. It taps for colorless, pay 3, sack it, you get a creature back at random from your graveyard. A copy of Lonely Sandbar, the Onslaught blue cycling land. A copy of Remote Isle, the Urza Saga blue cycling land. 7 snow-covered islands. Spoiler alert, the snow-covered bit does not matter. And then 4 of each Tron land.
All right. Actually, a pretty healthy 22 lands.
Yeah, 22 lands is a good place for this deck to be. It has a frankly absurd amount of card draw. Like Memory Lapse, kind of. And we've been talking with the patrons about this quite a bit. It's kind of remand. It's not really remand, but it's kind of in that your opponent is losing a card versus you drawing a card. But I don't know. Like, you got plenty of card draw in this deck. I don't think you need to worry about hitting enough lands with 22 of them in the deck. I think you're probably pretty safe there.
Yeah, I agree.
So what are your thoughts on this thing? Because this has like 1.50 with it, and a version of it showed up at Rags to Riches, the most recent Rags tournament. Any thoughts on this thing?
I honestly don't know what to think of it. It's playing a lot of good cards. Like, Tron is powerful, Muldrifter is powerful. I think we talked about it before on the show. It's a Muldrifter deck, right? Like, you can sort of play whatever and then play Tron and Muldrifter and you'll be fine.
I guess I'm just a little bit questioning of the sort of game plan of, I'm not seeing anything in this deck that allows it to go late enough to kind of like
it's a deck that relies a lot on like 1-for-1 removal or 1-for-1 countering, or like, you know, bouncing your opponent's creatures. Could we say this is a tempo deck?
Not like, I guess it's early in the game. Spells like Time Ebb and Temporal Eddy and Memory Lapse represent tempo-ish plays, but I'm not sure I'd go so far as to call this a tempo deck, because it's when I think tempo deck, and I'm not sure how many folks listening are on Twitter. There's a great meme going around of the definition of a tempo deck, and when I think tempo, I think efficient creatures backed up by protection and removal for your opponent's threats, like interaction, like a lot of interaction. And here, like, you're not hoping to land an early threat and ride it to victory. You're hoping to just prolong the game long enough that you can start like establishing these weird locks and, you know, tempo-ish plays, but you're not seeking to play that game of like, I'm going to resolve one Delver, make sure you can't resolve anything that interferes with that plan, and like just bash in for three a turn.
Okay, that's fair.
Now this deck, I've seen this list before. I've seen discussion about it before. If it has a second color added to it, where do you feel like it goes?
I feel like you could play. Sorry, I'm just thinking. Maybe you could play Splash Green for Pulse, Splash Red for, you know, an actual removal suite. I don't know. Because I do like the Gone Missing plan. It is kind of fun. But maybe instead of Time Ebb and Temporal Eddy, you could find something that's a little bit more effective. Maybe still play Snow-Covered Lands and then play Scred. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess like you could splash into red for that. I kind of like the idea of splashing into green, not just for like Pulse, but like you could splash into green and also use that as a way to get access to Moments pieces for the early game.
That's true.
And then maybe like trimming off some of the expedition maps in favor of Simic Signets. And, you know, Adrian,
what?
Do you know
Help.
what splashing green gets us?
Battlefield Scrounger?
No, it doesn't get a Battlefield Scrounger, you big turkey. It gets us
Fingered Marauder?
Temporal Spring.
Mike, please.
No, I'm gonna go to bat for this one. I think that if you're gonna splash green in this deck, you do it because Temporal Spring exists. Temporal Spring is 1 green, blue, put target permanent on top of its owner's library. So it is a 3 mana. It's a 3 mana version of Gone Missing without the investigate part. But I would argue that if you're gonna play green in this deck, this is a draw for you.
I like it actually. You're right.
See, I'm not a crazy person. I promise you. But I think if I was gonna branch this into another color, it would my definite like gut reaction would be like go blue green. You could even I guess it's a little hard to hit turn 2, but like you could even potentially make the argument for running some amount of Coiling Oracles, just as a way to kind of hit Tron a little bit earlier. Outside of that, there's not a whole lot of great blue-green cards, but just something I thought I'd toss out there.
No, I like it. You clearly put a lot of thought. Sorry, that sounded condescending, but no, I think that green might help shore up some of these, you know, little bit weaker card choices. And it's not like you couldn't do it. You could, you know, you have Prophetic Prism. You could swap Izzet Signet for Simic Signet, and then you could play some amount of the filter lands as well. And I think you'd be just fine off of a small splash.
Yeah, I don't even think like filter lands. Like I think you'd probably just wind up replacing a couple of the cycling lands with gain lands even. Now my only concern here is that we might be missing something, so I'm just gonna quickly double check and see if there's any other top of library bounces, because I want to say, isn't there one from Theros block that scries?
Yeah, there's Voyage's End and Griptide. Voyage's End, I'm pretty sure, is to hand, but Griptide is the top of library. It's 3 and a blue.
All right, let me just double check and see what else we've got. There's Aethertoe, which is 3 and a hybrid Azorius. Put target attacking or blocking creature on top of its owner's library with Conspire. What else do we have here? God, not a lot. I'm kind of shocked.
Turns out this is an unfun mechanic, Mike.
It turns out, I think more than anything else, it's just not a good mechanic. It doesn't actually like solve the problem. It just slows down the problem. Yeah, I'm just looking here and like there's not a lot of really great cards that manipulate cards to the top of your opponent's deck. And yeah, I guess I could see the argument that that might be a slightly unfun mechanic. So I guess my only concerns, or one of my concerns with this deck, is the fact that this deck does not win quickly. Oh, you know what we missed? Grasp of Phantasms, Adrian.
How dare you?
It's a 4-mana put a creature back on top of its owner's library, but it is flashback for 8. I don't know. There's, again, this is a bit of a niche mechanic, so I'm not surprised that I'm not exactly finding, untapped stores of gold here. So I guess my concern with this would just be the fact that your actual win con here is what? 6 or 10 creatures, most of which are 1/1s and 2/2s. I have to imagine clock is a problem.
Muldrifter's got the beats.
Yeah. Again, it just makes me think about splashing into another color, maybe red, because if you can you could get to double red in this deck without a lot of trouble, and then you could just, Rolling Thunder them.
For sure.
Let's take a quick peek at the sideboard, because let's talk about the fact that the first 2 things in this sideboard are lands. We got a 1 of Quicksand, which is a land that taps for colorless mana, or it taps and you sacrifice it. Target attacking creature without flying gets -1/-2 until end of turn. This is an interesting include in the board. Where do you think this comes in besides Stompy?
It comes in versus Tribe.
Oh, yeah, of course.
I'm guessing you have a lot of tools against Tribe anyway, between Time Ebb, Temporal Eddy, Gone Missing, but they can just rebuild with that because those are all sorcery speed. So with Quicksand, you actually do have a way to disrupt their combo at instant speed.
Yeah, and also in an uncounterable manner. It's a little bit more difficult for someone to interact with Quicksand in a meaningful way than it is to interact with a spell, especially because Tribe does get to play, I think, one of probably the best counter spells for that deck in the form of Circular Logic.
Circular Logic, yeah.
So I can definitely see the argument here for Quicksand. We got 1 copy of Radiant Fountain, the colorless land that gains you a life when it gains you 2 life when it enters the battlefield. I don't know why this is here in the board.
Maybe the deck builder is worried about burn, but I don't know.
But is siding 1 copy of gain 2 life really going to do it?
Well, you also have 2 Dispels, counter target instant spell, and 3 Hydroblasts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think those are much more reasonable includes against that deck.
Mm-hmm.
Now this deck's stock is probably going down if people continue to play the more creature based burn lists that have been showing up with what do you call it? Gitu Lavamancer or Lava. Yeah.
Are people playing that deck?
I think I saw it in the results for the challenge. I could be mistaken, but I was pretty sure I saw it either in the challenge results. Yeah, there it is. There's someone sitting at 4-2 with it. But returning to the sideboard, there's a single copy of Capsize, 3 copies of Fade Away. I can only presume for Elves and Boros. 2 copies of Serrated Arrows, and 2 extra copies of Wretched Griff for those matchups with heavy amounts of removal. So what's kind of your verdict on this thing? Because it's out there.
I think it looks fun if big blue decks sort of strike your fancy. I think sleeve it up and take it to your next F&M. I think the fact it's only one 5-0 result speaks to that's a little bit inconsistent. But at your local meta, I don't think you'll have too big of a problem because you are, like I said, playing some pretty strong cards that are strong by themselves. Tron and Muldrifter.
Yeah, this kind of strikes me as one of those
Game has started.
like 30-70, 70-30 decks where like matchups are either pretty good for you or pretty bad for you. I don't think this is like, one of those 50% against the field types of brews. Yeah. In terms of price, it's $50 online and it's $75 in paper. And I'm looking through in paper all the parts of this that are expensive. Besides the snow-covered, I guess even the snow-covered islands have other uses. One thing I do want to quickly mention: did you notice Muldrifter is $150 now?
I did not notice that. It's unfortunate. Will I ever complete my promo set, I wonder?
I don't even want to know how much those are worth. Yeah, and I'm looking online, and yeah, the Hydro Blasts are pricey, but like you'll get use out of those, and the islands are a little on the pricey side of things. But again, if you ever want to play Blue Red Delver, you're gonna need those anyway. So I can't see any of this being like a downright bad investment, but
Yeah, my promo Muldrifter is now like $15.
Yeah, I don't care for the art. It's a little too aggressive. I like my dumb flying fish.
Yeah.
All right, so we're closing the book on Mono Blue Tron now, and we're moving on to the recent metagame results because we have had a late episode. We've been busy. We had the anniversary episode, so like we have not had a chance to really sit back and look at the metagame results. And as we've talked about before on this show, with the swap to leagues not really giving perhaps the most useful data, we're now kind of left with the challenges. And you brought this up because you thought there were some interesting things worth discussing. What happened this past week in the Pauper Challenge, Adrian?
Well, we saw 3 Stompy decks, granted in the bottom, but still in the top 8. So that's one of the big things I wanted to cover. Other miscellaneous news is that One Land Spy is in the top 32. We'll cover that as well. But let's take a look at these top 8s. So the first is Hellsaw in first place with Stonehorn Dignitary Tron. I am understanding based on some questions I asked some folks that's a preference of the pilot to run Stonehorn Dignitary, but clearly it worked in a top 8 where the 3 bottom decks are Stompy. That's obviously seems like a good call.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, the deck is just stacked to beat decks like that. It's got a main deck Serrated Arrows. I think that actually might be coming in for Tribe and Delver because it's very good against both of them. You can flicker it with the Ghostly Flicker to keep doing it. Serrated Arrows actually seems like a very well-positioned card at the moment.
I'm still running in Tron, in Marasatron, one main, one side, just because like it has game against Tribe, it has game against Delver,
Also, shockingly, in second place is Mono Black Control. Some of the new tech in this list, and I know I'm talking about innovations that are a little bit older, but I just want to talk about sort of where these decks are landing at right now. We see 2 copies of Thorn of the Black Rose in the main deck, and then 2 copies of it in the sideboard as well. Also a Keep a Gang Shinobi, which is pretty sweet, but Mono Black has become a Monarch deck. And I know that it was sort of a will she, won't she for a while there, but I would say squarely is a Monarch deck at this point. When we were in Japan, I saw my friend, I was going to say his name, but I guess it's not important, beat the mirror simply because he was the one who had the Monarch, and the opponent was not running any Thorns of the Black Rose themselves. So in that matchup, where you're really about grinding your opponent out of resources, and whenever the dust settles, whoever has the creature basically wins the game. That helped him out a ton.
So I have a question. Do you think it's been long enough that we can finally say that like Mono Black is, while not tier 1.0, is like tier 1.5 at this point?
Absolutely. And my reasoning behind that is that it can run, it has the tools it needs in order to beat the Monarch decks, Sword of the Black Rose. It has the tools it needs to beat the Delver decks, Quambage Witches. It has a catch-all removal spell in the form of Oubliette. It has card draw and Sign in Blood. It has Chainer's Edict. Like, it really has all the tools it needs in order to take down a tournament. So I think it's actually a pretty reasonable choice right now. I think it doesn't have Um, I don't know what I was going to say there. I would say that it is by and large sort of the Jund deck of the format, where it's got a lot of catch-alls, it's got the beats, it's got the discard, it's got a bunch of removal. So it's a solid choice again in my opinion, even if it's not putting up results like it used to, because it used to be just such a dominant force in the format.
Yeah, I definitely think that with changes we've seen with regards to how Stompy behaves and the fact that they can kind of flood the board kind of did push this out a little bit. I mean, obviously it kind of went completely underground when Drake was in the format, and it kind of never recovered, and now it's kind of seeing a resurgence, which I like that. I like that it's coming back.
It can also afford main deck bogs without sacrificing too much, which I think is huge. So yeah, I like where the deck is positioned right now. In third place, we have Blue Red Delver. No surprise there. I think it's still one of the best decks in the format, if not the best deck in the format. It's definitely one of the three pillars that we talk about on the show kind of a lot. Monarch, Tron, and Gush. So I won't spend too much time on that. But the fourth place one is very interesting. He was in the water, got fourth place with Pestilence. And Mike, before the show, you were asking me, do I think Pestilence is a real deck? And I still honestly don't know.
So I only ask because the last time I managed to make it out to a Paper Pauper event here, in a field of 8 people, there were 2 people on Pestilence, and both of them were doing fine. And I keep seeing this week after week, and obviously, with the league results being given to us the way they are, it doesn't really give you full data on, how many times did this 5-0 versus other decks, but this is a deck that keeps showing up, and the lists have kind of converged on this, Skyfisher with some amount of value ETB creatures, then amount of Guardians of the Guild Pact, some Stinkweed Imps,
and I don't know, obviously leagues are a different story. We've discussed that, but I did watch Any New Province pilot this to a 4-1 the other day on his stream. So I think the deck is the thing. I've seen it in action. It's got game.
I think the fact that this is a deck that can run one or both of the Monarch cards if it so chooses does give it a lot of game. And while you're trading off the red from Boros Monarch for black, what you're getting in return is stuff like Pestilence sometimes does just shut off a game from being winnable.
It's interesting that you say that this deck can play either Monarch card, because this list is playing neither.
This one isn't, but most of the lists that I've been seeing have run some number, usually Palace Sentinels, and I think part of that is just the fact that it is a little bit harder to kill, and does have a faster clock. But
I would say if you're in black white, I think you're better off playing for one of the black roads because of Death Touch and also budget. But Palace Sentinels is good. The reason Palace Sentinels is so much more expensive is because Boros Monarch's a tier 1 deck, and you need 3 of them, and it's from a very small set. So that is, I think, what contributes to it being way more expensive than Thorn of the Black Rose.
Now, I do want to also talk about the fact that this has some sweet sideboard tech in the form of Giftivore Zova, because notably, it's one of the few things in our format that you can actually enchant Guardian of the Guild Pact with.
And didn't Alex Ullman run those in... No, he was playing them in mono white, I want to say, a while back.
Yeah, you can totally do that. Interesting that Patrician's Scorn was the choice for enchantment removal on the board here.
Well, it's basically free, right? So I don't mind it.
It is free. You are also running 7 of your own enchantments, and while you do have ways to recur them in the form of Custodious Squire.
Oh, because you're playing Pestilence.
It's just a little funky to me.
Another piece of neat meta tech that I think is interesting is 3 copies of Deadweight. Traditionally, those have been used to kill ATOG, but they're actually extremely good against Tribe combo as well.
That is true. There's no way that they can kind of get around that.
And then it's got your favorite card.
Debuff.
It's got your favorite card, Grim Harvest.
It does have Grim Harvest. It's funny because this is a doozy to watch players try to remember and pop in paper. One of my opponents who I actually played against the last time I went was on this list, and he was like, I just picked up this list. I've never played it before, and what is Grim Harvest? And I was like, yeah, it's a weird card.
You should have grabbed him by the collar and shouted, "We got a reader!" in his face.
Yeah, this is definitely probably I would guess probably the most reader card in the entirety of Pauper. For those who are unaware, Grim Harvest is 1 and a black for an instant return target creature from your graveyard to your hand. It has Recover for 2 and a black. Recover is when a creature is put into your graveyard from play, you may pay 2 and a black. If you do, return this card from your graveyard to your hand, otherwise exile it.
So something that's a little tangential, but I think is kind of interesting here. I was in Japan, and a lot of the comments are obviously in Japanese, and so it was really stretching my does that card, do I remember what that card does? And the answer was yes, actually, for all of them. So that was kind of nice, but I did have to try and remember what all these cards did, and I can't imagine playing against Grim Harvest, not seeing what it does. Oh, there was one I didn't know: destroy target spirit, non-spirit. But my opponent said it to me, and then I remembered that was the art on that card, and I was like, oh yeah, that's what that card does.
Rend Flesh.
No, it's not Rend Flesh.
Oh, destroy target spirit?
Yeah, non-spirit.
No. Non-spirit is Rend Spirit. There's Rend Spirit and Rend Flesh. Rend Spirit kills the spirit. Rend Flesh kills a non-spirit. I can guarantee.
Yes, that is what I'm thinking of. I'm thinking of another one with an elephant getting its skin twisted off of it.
You're thinking of Crippling Fatigue.
No, I'm thinking of. I know what you're thinking of with Crippling Fatigue. That's the elephant who's getting all the stuff thrown at him. There's another one. Maybe it's Ring Flesh. It's not important.
Yes, you are thinking of Ring Flesh. It's a Loxodon getting skin pulled off of them.
Yeah. Sorry, everyone.
We've gone down a hell of a tangent.
Up next we have Tribe Combo, Green Prinny, mainstay of the format, doing his stuff. And the more I think about Tribe Combo, the more that I'm not really sure how I feel about it. Is it a tier 1 deck? Is it not a tier 1 deck? I think that it definitely puts up results, but I wonder if part of it is because that people don't really know how to play against it and they play scared. I was talking to 86 about this the other day, and I think that might be the case. That was sort of his thought on it.
I think another part of it is just the fact that people don't afford enough counterplay for it. Seeing the deck we covered today, having the singleton copy of Quicksand out of the board is a weird concession to have to make to this type of deck. It just, because of circular logic, it interacts very well with a lot of decks that can't afford to run a pile of counter spells to interact with circular logic. So I think that, coupled with the fact that it gets days, which it doesn't care about if it bouncing a land. It gets to run all the card fixing in the world.
That's why I'm a fan of Serrated Arrows in the meta right now, because it's good against Delver and it's very good against this deck. And I also want to point out, look at the sideboard for this deck. This is the evolution this deck is taking, where it concedes that it cannot beat Delver, and so it's playing cards of its own in order to help with its extremely bad matchup. You got 2 copies of Stormbound Geist, you have 3 copies of Serrated Arrows, so you're looking to gun for those decks that you could not beat usually, because the Delver list is actually very good against Tribe because they can't really interact with Spellstutter very well, and you all have so much removal and interaction, so they are looking to play a completely different game against that deck.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how this deck has evolved. What else do we have? Is the rest of the top 8 entirely Stompy?
The rest of the top 8 is Stompy. There's not very much variation in the lists. In fact, it looks like 7th and 8th place are the exact same. Am I reading this right?
Yep,
the exact same list.
That looks pretty much exactly the same. The 6th place one does have a little bit more of a teched out creature base and some slightly more interesting sideboard choices, swapping out a Epic Confrontation and a Scattershot Archer for a pair of Tangles.
And I think that's interesting. We talked about Tangle and aggro decks last week. I will say they are good in the mirror, and they do beat Affinity. So, Team or Battle Rage Affinity. So, maybe not the worst. But I certainly don't think the best. I think it's very strange. And then as we go down, we see the usual cast. We got another Delver list and then another Stomp.
Hinting that they use it for determining bans. So, I don't know. I wish that they would actually surface more of this information, but again, we have no control over that. So hopefully things change, but I'm glad that we're still at least getting the top 32 for the challenge. I think that's good data that is actionable.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. I think that pretty much wraps it up for today. Is there anything else you wanted to cover, or you ready to take us out of the show?
Thanks for joining us today. No, I'll take us out. This podcast is brought by the support of our patrons, especially Zazakon. Please consider supporting us if you like the show just like them. You can
Welcome everyone to Color Commentary. We are your pauper commentators, Michael Petrick and Adrian Barzales. How's it going, Adrian?
Oh, you know, good.
It's been a minute since we've actually recorded. My life has been rather hectic at the moment. Lots of school stuff that I had to take care of.
And you finished. You're alive. Congrats.
Yeah, we got our project completed. I had a group project in the class I'm taking, so anyone who's ever been in a school probably has an idea as to how a group project goes, and it's never according to plan. But, I had a bunch of stuff to take care of. I took care of it, but now I am back. I'm ready to, do this whole
Mike,
thing.
You weren't the kind of person who delegated tasks and then did them anyway, because that was my biggest problem with some group projects I had in college.
There were a handful of things that I did have to take care of after delegating them, but it was nothing too major. It wasn't like I was picking up like 2 full people's worth of work. It was kind of like
no. I just mean I was in a group project where we had a meeting and work was delegated, and I didn't do my stuff immediately, and so the other person who delegated it just decided to do it and then complained that I hadn't done anything.
No. The only work that I took over was stuff where people were struggling to take care of it and asked for some help. So there was some redistricting of work responsibilities, but
some gerrymandering of work.
yeah, I like that turn of phrase. All right, let's get into the upkeep. You've got a special announcement this week, which I think is pretty neat. It was an idea that you pitched to me, so I was proud of the initiative. But first, we were brought to you in part by Original Magic Art. Original Magic Art is a great online store. They have all sorts of tokens, dice bags, playmats, art prints from both the history of Magic and art history as a whole. There's a lot of really neat stuff that they've done, and I really do stand by their work. They've got neat products, and they also work directly with Magic artists who license their particular artwork. Like right now they have an Ancient Carp playmat. If that card is really your jam, perhaps they also have Solemn Simulacrum mats, which might be a little bit more generally popular, but they are constantly having new stuff come out and hit their website, and it's really neat. We stand by their products wholeheartedly, but the great news here, if you want and you're already in the checkout and you're about to buy these wonderful art products, you can use our affiliate code. So if you type in, there's somewhere in the checkout process to put in a coupon code. If you use commentary, all caps spelled is in the name of this show, you will get 5% off your order. We get a little bit of kickback, so you're helping keep the lights on here, and you're also getting a discount on some really nice art stuff. So
I'm gonna blow your mind, Mike. Yeah. I just recently purchased my first order from Original Magic Art for tokens for my Boros deck.
Question: did you use our affiliate code?
I did indeed. Don't worry, I'm not a total idiot. I can't remember the name of the first artist. There were some limited edition bird tokens. I got Ken Myers Jr., the Monarch token, which is the guy with the mask and all the butterflies. And then I got a Randy Gallegos clue token, which is the hand drawing the key out of the water.
Oh, that's right. They do also do the they do Magic artists custom tokens, which are pretty neat. But yeah, definitely. Again, that code is commentary, all caps, spelled as is in the name of the show. And that'll get you 5% off your order. Pretty sweet deal. So, Adrian, what do you have for us this week in the announcements?
Well, we've updated the Patreon. We should probably change that line in the script here, because we had it for a while. For just as little as $1 an episode, you can hear the full show, including the pre and post shows, as well as getting access to our patron exclusive Discord channel. Now, the announcement. I'm sweetening the deal a little bit here. We are currently at $89 an episode. My birthday is next month. I'll be turning 27 years old, and for my birthday, I would like nothing more than to hit $100 and meet our first stretch goal. Two things will happen. The first, Mike and I will be financially obligated at that point to provide video portions to our set reviews. Okay, great. That's something that we never thought possible in our wireless stream, so thank you, patrons. But the other thing that we're going to do is when we hit that goal, when, not if, we hit that goal, if we do it before my birthday, that is, we will be giving away a free color commentary playmat in a drawing to one of our patrons. So really hope y'all sign up. I'd love to give away that playmat. It would make me really happy. Happy birthday to me and all that. And you get a sweet playmat, or you have the potential, I should say, of getting a sweet playmat out of the deal.
Yeah, I'm really excited. Those I've seen those playmats in person. They look actually pretty sweet.
I own one because I'm vain as all hell.
Yeah. I do not, because I have one playmat, and why would I need another? But
you gotta hang them up on your wall. Trophies of victories.
All right, that's fair. I will probably one day own one, and I'll just sign it myself.
For yourself. To Mike, from Mike.
Yeah, really double down on the full narcissism.
Hey, we've been covering a lot of words named after Greek people being tortured.
Yeah, our pre-show just had a discussion about Tantalus.
Yeah, and then just the other day, I feel like I was explaining Sisyphus to someone. It's been popping up a lot lately.
Huh. Funny how life works like that. All right.
Yeah.
Enough of the announcements. We got a sweet
Sisyphean announcements.
It feels like that at times. But this week we have a deck to talk about that is a red-green aggro deck. And you found this one. How did you come across this little one?
I feel like someone posted it on Reddit, and I was just like, I can't believe a 2-color aggro deck 5-0'd at any point, let alone twice. So I said, you know what? That's the deck for this week.
Yeah, I mean, historically, 2-color aggros kind of struggled in Pauper as a format.
And it's because our mana base is not very good. But I think as we go through the list, the most notable exclusion is there are no rugged highlands in the deck. Aggro decks that want to play 1-drops do not also want to play tap lands. And I wonder if this deck gets a little bit better. No, there's too many creatures. I was thinking Get to Lava Runner might change the texture of this deck a little bit, because this deck is at least a month old, but I don't think so.
Well, let's get into some of the cards here. And you were just talking about aggressive 1-drops, and let's start things off with the 2 copies of Frenzied Goblin. So there's a red mana for a 1/1. Whenever it attacks, you can pay a red. If you do, target creature can't block this turn. So a nice disruptive threat, if you will. It's not exactly, blowing anyone's socks off. It's a 1/1 for 1, but it does make it more difficult for your opponent to profitably interact with your attacks.
Yeah, so the only problem with this card, and it's something I didn't realize back when I first read it, is that you can only do this once.
I mean, that's given the state of like a lot of board states in Pauper, I don't think that's like it certainly would be better if you could just dump mana into this thing and just, make sure that their entire team can't block, but I don't know. In the control matchups where you're just trying to get in for that last point of damage, there's not really that many creatures, and it is the fact that like it does just make the creature unable to block. It's not just it can't block Frenzied Goblin. So I don't know. I still think it's pretty valuable.
Yeah. Following it up, we got Curd Ape, which is R for a 1/1. When the forest is in play, Curd Ape gets +1/+2. So essentially, it's a 1-mana 2/3. Hopefully, most of the time. Sometimes it's not though.
Yeah, I mean this is much more powerful in other formats where you have access to dual typed lands. It's I don't know if this has seen play in Legacy in the past like 5 years, but I know that at some point there was a Legacy zoo deck, and I know that in Modern for a long time there was a zoo deck, but when you have type duels, this can be a turn 1, 2, 3. Whereas in this deck, you're kind of not always guaranteed that.
Yeah. The next couple creatures I actually want to talk about in tandem, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go for it.
First up, we have 4 copies of Burning Tree Emissary, which is a great card. RG or RG gets you a 2/2, which says add RG to your mana pool. So just to be clear, its mana cost is hybrid, so you can play either red or green. Other places we've seen this is in decks like Stompy or RDW, which can really only leverage one of the mana types. But in this deck, it slots in perfectly with the next couple of creatures
Your game
here.
has started.
We have 4 copies, for example, of Jund Hackblade, which is red and then hybrid green or black. So really, we're casting it for red-green. As long as you control another multicolored permanent, Jund Hackblade gets +1/+1 and has haste. So I could see a game where you go turn 1, whatever. Turn 2, Burning Tree Emissary, Jund Hackblade, attack for their, 5, right? Like that could happen with Curd Ape and Jund Hackblade. And I think that is where some of the strength of the deck lies. But we're not done. We also have Naya Hushblade, which is our WG. So, we're casting it for red-green again. As long as you control another multicolored permanent, Naya Hushblade gets +1/+1 and has Shroud. Well, that's kind of whatever. I like the haste a little bit better. And then our final one is Rip Clan Crasher, which is RG for a 2/2 with haste. Sort of rounding that out is Mudbrawler Cohort. Whenever it gets +1/+1, as long as you control another red creature, it's a 1 and an R for a 1/1 with haste. So your turn 2 play is going to be very powerful if you can set it up with Burning Tree Emissary, which is what I'm trying to get at here.
Yeah, so it kind of... This deck is more than any other deck trying to leverage not only the mana produced by Burning Tree Emissary's ETB effect, but also take advantage of the fact that it is producing 2 colors of mana, because that was one of those things where once Stompy started playing this, you started to see a little bit more commonly the Vault Scourges in the main deck, because they can be cast off the red mana. Or in RDW, you started seeing like a lot of red and 1 mana cost, because that can still be played off of the mana generated by Burning Tree Emissary. This, however, is just going as deep as it can and just saying, like, let's play these weird things that, like, the fact that Jund Hackblade and Naya Hushblade can both be played off of Burning Tree Emissary's mana and also immediately then buff themselves because of the Burning Tree is a sweet little piece of interaction. Now, Rip Clan Crasher, I'm like kind of a little bit more lukewarm on, personally.
Yeah, because honestly, I don't know what the upside is over a card like Valley Dasher, which can be more reliably cast. Sure, Valley Dasher has to attack every turn, but if you're not attacking with Rip Clan Crasher, things have gone very wrong.
Yeah, this just kind of seems like one of those things. Like,
well, I will say that it does also, if you don't have the Burning Tree start, it does also pump Hackblade and Hushblade.
That is true. Like, it does give you a little bit of upside in that regard.
So maybe that's a pretty good reason to play the card. I don't know.
So yeah, it's a little tricky here, because like, looking at this list, my immediate impulse is to say, like, your starts where you can like just go Burning Tree Emissary into one of these like very specific 2-drops. I feel like you're in a pretty decent position, but the moment you start thinking about like the fail cases, right? Like, if you only see like 1 color of mana here, you're very, very quickly going to be in trouble if you don't have that Burning Tree Emissary. And even if you do, like, you get the Burning Tree into something else, and then you might still have stuff stranded in your hand. Now, there is one other creature in here. There's 2 copies of Goblin Heel Cutter, which is 3 and a red for a 3/2. And whenever it attacks, target creature can't block this turn, but it also has Dash for 2 and a red. So you can cast it for its dash cost. If you do, it gains haste, and at the end of turn, you return it to your hand.
I like this card. It's a top end in aggressive creature red decks that serves its purpose very well. It's basically big Frenzied Goblin in this deck, in my opinion.
Yeah, like, it's just very efficient. Now, let me run something by you. So, both of us were a little bit lukewarm on the prospect of Rip Clan Crasher. how would you feel about swapping those over for Scab Clan Mauler? Are you familiar with this card?
No, tell me what it is.
Scab Clan Mauler, red and a green. It's a 1/1 with Bloodthirst 2 and Trample. So if you've gotten in for damage on turn 2, this thing is a 3/3 trample for 2.
What's it called?
Scab Clan Mauler.
Let's see it for myself.
So
all right, I don't hate it. I think Rip Clan Crasher has the benefit of having haste, but 3/3 with trample is nothing to sneeze at. And also it's a berserker.
That is one of the greatest types in Magic, but I'm just thinking that it might be like Rip Clan Crasher. The haste is nice, but I'm just wondering if, again, like it almost seems like Valley Dasher would be better in this slot outside of the slight synergy with the blades.
Well, if you don't have Rip Clan Crasher, you only have 12 of the multicolored. Well, we have some more multicolored permanents, but we'll talk about those in a second. We only have, 12 of the creatures that are multicolored. So I wonder. I don't know. I'd be interested to see the numbers on this.
All right, let's move on to some of the spells, and maybe we can suss some stuff out here. 4 copies of Chain Lightning.
And Mike and I were discussing this before the show. I have no idea why the deck would run Chain Lightning over straight up Bolt.
So I actually have a quick little theory. And it revolves around the fact that I don't know if you looked at this deck list and how much it costs online.
It's like $5.
It is like $5. That is.
You think that's a budget consideration? That's
looking online. Lightning bolts are about $1 online.
I mean, 4 cents versus $4. Sure. I mean, that would double the price of the deck. I could see that if we look at the sideboard, which we will. There's also no Pyroblasts or Gorilla Shamans, so sure, I'm willing to say that's a budget consideration on Mitgo.
Yeah, I have a feeling that this may be like something that someone put together to see like how cheaply they could put together a aggro deck that could potentially 5-0, which I think is a neat experiment. But I think that these Chain Lightnings, I cannot see a reason to play these over a playset of Lightning Bolts if your budget allows for it.
People might try and say, well, you can chain the Chain Lightning, but I just don't think that argument holds very much water. When was the last time you actually Chain Lightning a Chain Lightning?
I have done it once.
I feel like I've done it once also in Boris, and I think I killed my opponent with it. So I mean, there are definitely sweet spots, but I just overall don't think it's really like most people aren't going to chain this back, and then you have enough mana to chain it back on them.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like I've been in positions where I could chain it back, but then realize like, oh, my opponent will just do the exact same thing, and I'm just giving them card advantage.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely would consider swapping this out just for plain old Lightning Bolt, because that is a real downside. Next up, we have 4 of I know at least at one point modern playable card, Violent Outburst, which is 1 red and a green for an instant. It has Cascade, and it has some other text, but Cascade is the important bit here.
No, it's the other text is important too. Oh, sorry, go ahead, though.
When you play this spell, remove cards from the top of your library from the game until you remove a non-land card that costs less than this spell. You may play it without paying its mana cost, and then you put all the cards you removed on the bottom of your library in a random order. Then it also gives all your creatures +1/+0 until end of turn.
Yeah, that is relevant in this deck. Pumping your team. The Cascade, I wonder how good it actually is. You have to cast it pre-combat in order for it to matter with your haste creatures is my only concern. So I wonder if just straight up Trumpet Blast wouldn't be better because it pumps a little bit more. Although I guess this does get a card out of your deck, and it's not going to be Goblin Heel Cutter. It's not going to be another card we'll discuss in a second, but most of the cards in this deck are 2-drops.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to imagine like the best case scenario is you do this before combat and you hit
podcast that talks about commons 40 or 50% of the time. My name's Rob. Seth, how's life?
Yeah, up and down, not too bad. I can't really complain about it. Some days are better, some days are worse. So, up and down, but all in all, can't complain.
Yeah, well, life is a 51-49 matchup, I guess. You just got to figure out what side you're on. It might be the most sage thing that I've ever said.
Agreed.
Yeah, everything's been fine. Last couple of weeks I've been talking about being in a rut with Pauper and everything, but actually the other day, I think it was Monday or Tuesday, I actually grabbed a trophy.
And how did that precious gold feel when you clutched it against your your chest?
Dude, when I clicked on the button that said okay, it was like the best.
I'm so jealous of you. Yeah. All I get to do is test standard and hate my life.
Oh man, yeah. I went to the dark side.
What's that? Oh,
yeah.
Did you buy Delver?
I played Delver.
Did you delve into people's souls and crush them?
I did. It felt really good, to be honest with you. I think that might have been part of my doldrums was just kind of playing the same couple things over and over and expecting to do something different with it. But we'll talk a little bit more about that type of stuff later. How is that RPTQ testing going anyway?
Lovely. My deck can't beat the blue-white historic deck. The most played deck in the format that I'll probably play. We'll say it's going to be 10 rounds, probably 6 rounds.
Splendid.
Oh, it is great. Although I can say that curving like Llanowar Elves into Jade Light Ranger into turn 3 Karn into just playing it like a Vrask on turn 4 is a pretty great feeling. But no, in all honesty, it's actually not going too bad. I've realized that the creatureless blue-white deck is just a really bad matchup pre and post board. It's like 25-75 pre-board and like 35-65 post board. Not in my favor. Right. However, the mono green and mono red decks are both very favorable, and I feel like with my play style favors the mid range decks, like the black green deck I'm playing,
mm-hmm.
and I think the mirror matches I will be fine, and I think that my deck is built in a way to handle the mirror matches better.
That's good.
So yeah, and I mean most of the time it's going to be aggro v aggro in the middle since it's a team event. So I'm going to have to play against mid-ranger control every round. So I'm going to be my Sunday night, I'm going to be sitting at a bar, either really elated from making the Pro Tour and just not caring about how my head feels, or I'm going to have my head down in agony as I sip rum and cokes and just try to make the pain go away that way.
Oh, poor guy.
I'm talking about physical pain, not mental. I will have a headache by the end of the event.
I mean, both, I assume, right?
Probably. There's a good chance. I mean, we're expecting close to probably 100 teams there, and only the top 2 teams qualify.
Is that really still the cut? Wow.
Yeah, that's going to be the battle.
Woof.
We'll be all right. I mean, I'll be upset if I play well and don't queue because we top 4 instead of top 2. Yeah, I mean, tough beats. We did our best. That's still a better finish than I've ever had, and I told the team today my goal going forward is to just do better at every regional than I did at the one previous. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, Mr. Cucinato, that can't happen for because, the first one he went to, he top 4 and queued for the Pro Tour. So bar set a little high.
Yeah. Well, on the other hand, though, I mean, every single one after that's kind of ruined for him, right? So.
In all honesty, the whole point is just go and have fun with your friends, and the magic is just, extra on top of it.
Totally. So speaking of friends, we've accumulated some friends of the show here, and as we alluded to last week, just wanted to take a little time this week to give a shout out to all of our Patreon patrons who have jumped on since we've gone live on there. We certainly appreciate all you guys and everything that you've at least pledged to us here. I know the first withdrawal hasn't happened yet, so I'm keeping my eye out for if anyone bails, but barring that, a special thank you goes out to the following people: George Wall, Kevin Klock, Ben Vasco, Bill May, Jeff Kruger, Oisin Keller, I looked that one up, I think I got it right, Jarrett Mason, James Avery, Rob Cucinato, and Aaron Wilburn. So thanks so much to all you guys.
Yeah, I mean, thanks everyone. It's really appreciated, especially, right from the get-go, getting I think we have 10 patrons is what I counted. Mm-hmm. That's awesome. And everything you guys, your support for the show, the feedback you've given us, the questions you've asked, it's all appreciated. And I'm glad that if we've helped you in any way that we were able to do that for you.
Totally. It just feels like it just feels like you guys are kind of part of the show too in a way, and hopefully you feel that way too. So much appreciated. Spread the word. Let's see if you can get some more friends on that list for next time.
WORD.
Yeah.
I just put spaces in between all the letters to spread it out.
God. I mean, it could have been worse. You could have vocalized the underscores, and then I would have hung up on you.
Oh.
So I'll tell you what. Let's do some transitional material. Seth, it sounds like we would not make a very good two-headed giant team, would we?
Probably not. I don't like the format at all. Battle Bond's awful. I will probably still play in an event begrudgingly. I do want to open True Name Nemesis and just crush people.
Yeah, so that's our official introduction to Battle Bond, like it or not. Here's the thing. Obviously, with most sets, we do a full set review because there's enough cards and enough intrigue around those cards to actually warrant a whole show. But Battle Bond being as gimmicky as it is, and the fact that it's not even getting an MTGO release, kind of led us to just give it a little bit of a, I guess, dishonorable mention on this show, or on this episode, I guess. But look, I mean, at least I think all of the mechanics in the set are, pretty well conceived for what they're trying to do. It's meant to be two-headed giant draftable and all this, stuff, which is kind of the opposite of what I like doing in Magic, if you listen to the outtakes last week. But it just doesn't really lend itself to giving us anything for Pauper, and anything that would pop up for Pauper is only going to be in treasure chests.
Yeah, and I mean, that's even if they decide to put it in treasure chests, right?
Yep.
So what we're saying is this is like a box of multivitamins, but every fifth one is a laxative.
Oh, God. That sounds awful. Sounds like every Tuesday is going to be a bad day. But seriously, like, if any of these cards do stick for Pauper, one, we don't even know if they're going to give it to us in a chest. Two, we won't even know if they do stick for Pauper because we won't be able to play with them online and kind of let the hive mind do its job. And also, if it does end up in a treasure chest, like, those things are going to be like 1 million tickets like Monarch cards, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, basically, because they're going to be scarce. They're not normal cards that you can just open in a pack. And the only way that the people who vend the cards can get them is people who open them in chests and sell them to them. Mm-hmm. And most people who open those cards, like, okay, well, they don't win them from drafts, they win them from constructed queues, and it's like, okay, get rid of it. Or they win it from a Pauper event, and they're like, all right, yeah, I kind of want this card anyway. So you're really only getting half of them into the market.
Mm-hmm. Totally. So take that for what it's worth, I guess. Feel free, obviously, to go ahead and have fun at, release events and whatnot. I don't know. A lot of you guys might find it fun, and I support your decision to find this fun, but yeah, it's just not my cup of tea. And I don't know about you, Seth, but I found 2 cards worth mentioning real quick, if you even want to do that.
Yeah, I mean, we may as well go ahead. There's a few reprints that were downshifted too that I think we can bring up. I think they're not necessarily great cards, but I think they're worth mentioning that you could see play.
Okay, what are those that you had in mind?
Pierce and Peace Strider. So Pierce Strider, 4 generic mana for a 3/3. When it enters the battlefield, target opponent loses 3 life. And Peace Strider is the exact same stats, except when it enters play, you gain 3 life. So not even great cards, but I mean, they play well with like the Tortured Existence type of deck, or even Tron could play them as like, just a way to gain life quick. It's not quite Pulse, but it's a colorless way that they can cast it without without any kind of colored mana if they don't have a Prism or a colored land, but they have Tron on turn 3. Just not great cards, but I think that they're relevant and worth mentioning.
People already
Your
play
game has
Self-Assembler
started.
Tron, and if you look at Modern, there's the whole colorless Eldrazi deck. Do you think between Self-Assembler and these Striders, if we just got something like Spatial Contortion downshifted, do you think we could have a colorless aggro deck in Pauper?
I mean...
No. But I want it so bad.
I mean, we have the cards for it, but I don't know about colorless, but maybe monocolored with like mostly colorless with some monocolored cards, because you can play like Skittering Surveyor to go get your basic land.
Mm-hmm.
You have a lot of 1 and 2 drops that kind of stabilize the game and draw you cards.
You could probably play
so
Hedron
like
Crawler just like the mono red Eldrazi in Standard a couple years ago did, I guess.
Yeah, similar to that, and then you're just splashing like good value cards of one color, and you're just trying to go big with it.
Yeah, so I don't know, not quite there, but
it's close. It's very close. It's a glass cannon. If they have Ancient Grudge, you're screwed.
Yeah, no kidding.
Tremendously.
Well, I mean, Lord knows we'll probably see the Eldrazi at least 5 more times before this game becomes unprofitable. So who knows? But
yeah.
So yeah, I only had 2 cards myself as well. One of them is not a secret. There's been a lot of buzz about this on the internet. It's Saltwater Stalwart, which is 3 and a blue, so 4 mana, 2/4 Merfolk Warrior, but it's also a Tongue Twister built into a card. And whenever it deals damage to an opponent, target player draws a card. Now, there's a distinct difference between this and cards like Stealer of Secrets. Stealer of Secrets says it must deal combat damage to the opponent, but this one just says deals damage. So a lot of people have been totally flipping their lids and quitting their jobs over sticking a Viridian Longbow to this and just pinging people and drawing a card. And I don't know, can you find a way to draw a card that costs less than 8 mana?
Yes.
Can we just agree to do that instead?
Yes, I will pay 5 mana and draw 2 cards. Everybody knows this.
Perfect. Yeah, the math lines up. So I think that that's enough said about the Stalwart. Poor guy. The second card I had in mind was Combo Attack, and this one might actually see play if they put it in those chests. It's a sorcery for 2 and a green, 3 mana total. The way it reads is 2 target creatures your team controls each deal damage equal to their power to target creature. So, assuming that this shows up in a chest, and assuming that cards that refer to a team can be played in Eternal formats, I don't see why they wouldn't, because everything else has been fine for Legacy and blah, blah, blah.
Elves is a very large team, potentially.
And you know who's a modestly sized team with some large guys is Stompy. I think if we end up seeing this, Stompy might try to split this with Epic Confrontation and maybe try to jam, a couple of 2/2s, pop in a 4/4. That's a good way to get rid of a Denrova Horror, for example. Or if you got somebody suited up, you're going to be doing some work with this card if you got a team surviving out on the field there, because it's not a true fight card. Your creatures are the ones dealing damage, and they don't receive any damage back. So that could actually be pretty devastating in a gridlock.
I mean, I don't know, man. I mean, the card is definitely there. Like, it's just a matter of whether or not it is actually available online, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, nobody knows what is going to happen with these online, but my guess is that, like, WotC has looked at this. They know what's going to see play or potentially see play in Pauper and what's not, and they're going to take, like, 5 of each, and they're going to throw them in treasure chests, and that's the only way to get them. And then this card's going to be, like, $10 as soon as it hits one top 8 of a league or 5-0's one league, and then nobody else will be able to play it.
Yep. And then even if it levels off, it's still going to be like, do I want to pay 4 tickets for a card like this? And the answer is going to be, So,
In paper, I want foils.
Sure. But, we'll have to see what happens. But so concludes our Battle Bond set review. That's it.
Congratulations. That's the end of the episode. We'll see you guys next week.
No, come back.
Oh, okay.
We actually have we actually have a thing to talk about, believe it or not. And we kind of alluded to it at the start of the episode, but it's really easy to find yourself, chugging along, doing pretty well, whether it's paper events or online, grinding leagues out, stuff like that. But it's just as easy to find yourself falling into a bit of a just some virtual quicksand and just not doing so well, and it seems like you can't really find the right lines in any match, and it feels like you're mulliganing over and over, and you just run into a rough patch. And we just want to talk about some ways to kind of either identify that or do things to try to get out of that rut. So, Seth, why don't you lead us off and let us know what you might be thinking off the top of your head with that.
Well, as a lot of you may know, when we first started this podcast, I was basically playing Affinity, and Affinity for about, a month and a half, Rob?
Yeah, I almost wanted to make a permanent segment of the show about like the what was I going to call it? Like the Seth robot report, I think was what I was going to call it.
Right. I mean, like, it got to a point where it seemed like I couldn't lose. Like, I felt like I was untouchable with the deck. And I made a promise to you and our listeners that as soon as I lost a match, I would drop the deck and start playing something different. And I did. As soon as I lost one match, I dropped the deck. I haven't played it since. And in reality, if you want to get super technical with it, I was losing online with it quite a bit, and I was in a big rut with it online. I had 5-0'd about 6 leagues out of the 7 before we started the podcast. And then I just kind of hit this wall where I couldn't seem to win with the deck, but in paper I was crushing everybody. So I just stopped playing online. And that's not the answer. The answer is to try and trudge through it and adjust yourself and make the changes that you need to if you want to play a specific deck. However, I didn't do that, and I know that that's wrong, but let's face it, Moto costs money. Everybody knows that. Moto costs, it's not cheap. Especially once you get the deck together, it's still like it's $8 for a 5-round event, and if you don't go 3-2, well, guess what? You're going to pay more money into it. Mm-hmm. But I really got tired of paying the money for the events that I wasn't getting to play in a lot. And just trying to focus on paper and the podcast. But like hindsight, what I should have been doing was just taking a step back and kind of reevaluating the meta, changing my deck. Like instead of playing Fling, I should have just been playing like 3-teamer Battle Rage. Like that's where the meta was at that point online. But I wasn't doing that. It's way too easy to get blown out with Fling when there's a million decks playing Daze and Counterspell. Like that's not what you want to be doing. You may need to adjust like your 2-2 Pyro and Hydroblast to like 3 Pyroblasts and 1 Hydroblast based on the decks that are seeing play. And really just trying to evaluate, like, what are you playing on a consistent basis? What are you losing to regularly? And adjusting your 75. You have 75 cards in your deck. And some people are like, oh, well, some of those are permanent. You can't change those. Well, that's false. You have 75 slots for a reason. You can play whatever you want to in those slots as long as it's a common. I fell into this trap of like, nope, this is my 75. This is what I'm playing day in, day out. Every time I log on to Moto, this is the deck I'm using. And that's not true. In paper, to be honest, I haven't been super successful lately. I've been playing a lot of different decks. And part of that's more for this than it is for my own personal gain. Like, I don't care about winning in paper. Like, I just want to play Pauper. And at this point, like, I'd rather be playing a large multitude of different decks and giving everybody involved in this podcast better content and insight as to what decks I am playing, as opposed to just the Seth's robot report every week, which was fun while it lasted. But like, in all honesty, like, I still enjoy casting Preordain and Tortured Existence and Capsize and Tron Lands. Like, that's fun to me. Like, I enjoy doing all of those things, but I can't do it all at once. So I try to spread my breadth. And like, maybe after a month or two, when I, kind of get through this spurt with Monarch online, maybe I'll go back to Affinity and start playing it again. But really, sometimes you just kind of need to take a break from a deck and play something different, or just adjust the deck and have it play to a different style than what it normally does. I could go on for hours. I know Rob knows I will ramble if you let me, so I'm going to go ahead and just stop it there for now.
Yeah, I actually got up and left a couple times during all that. So, yeah, good segment, Seth. But, no, a couple of things you said really brought something to the forefront for me. One, yeah, I totally agree. Like, I think one of the first things you want to check out, and assuming this is Pauper, and I can assume that you have access to at least 2 decks, if not more. But just to kind of first sit back and kind of first reaction would be like, is this the right time for a deck like this? Like, especially online when, trends can ebb and flow so quickly and so drastically. Is this the right time to be playing this particular deck is definitely a thing. I also think that finding yourself in a bit of a losing streak, so to speak, can really lead to some self-fulfilling prophecies for you. I mean, if you get torched in a couple of leagues, then it's really easy. And I guess you can call this kind of like a slow-burning tilt, but it's really easy to go into following leagues thinking like, well, I'm just going to get smoked again, but, I got to keep trudging through with this same thing until I make it work to prove to myself that I can make this work and that I'm good enough to do it. And that's not the case. Like, you don't marry yourself to a deck as a Magic player and measure yourself based on your success with a particular deck. And if you do, then you're missing out on about 99% of the game, I think.
I agree.
Yeah, totally. And I think a big thing to do when you do fall into a rut like we're talking about with a particular deck is to kind of step back and stop playing, like stop actively playing a match for just a few minutes. Go look at your list. Just kind of sit back and just kind of rifle through what you're playing with. And the only real purpose for this is to kind of just, it's going to ground you and let you realize like, okay, this is what I've been playing with. Maybe it's not the right time to be putting Nettle Sentinels on the field. Maybe it's not the right time to be casting things like Chain Lightning. Things like this. It's just going to give you a different perspective on the same crap that you've been holding in your hands and doing poorly with. Just getting a different viewpoint on the same thing that you've been doing before you do anything else can just kind of bring you back down to earth and let you have time to just breathe and think, right? And another thing along that thread too is that, maybe just taking an actual break for a couple hours, couple of days, just kind of separate yourself from getting like ground into the dirt doing the same thing over and over. I mean, the classic saying is the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results, right? So it's clear that when things aren't going well, something needs to change, whether it's the tools that you're taking into battle, the mindset that you're taking into battle. Something needs to go a little bit differently. So I think just taking a short break from actually playing, go do something else, like whether it's fun or not fun or just anything else. Just separate yourself from what you're doing and come back, and you're going to have a different viewpoint on what might be going wrong. It's the same kind of thing that you hear from people about writing papers, like academic papers, is if you kind of find yourself at a writing block, get away from it for a little bit, come back, pick up where you left off, and you're going to see something differently. Your brain is going to just come with a fresh view of what the hell's going on, and you're going to be able to maybe figure out what you should be doing differently. I don't know if you agree with this next thing I'm going to say here, but sometimes it is just simply a matter of the emotions that you're bringing into your play. It may be that there's nothing wrong with the deck at all. It may be a situation where it's like, you've been jamming Delver for 3 weeks, and yeah, I played 10 leagues and got 6 trophies, and everybody loves me, and I'm great. And then, for some reason,
if you're doing that with Delver, nobody loves you. I already disagree.
But you sure love yourself. But the point is, like, you're playing Delver, you're playing it well, and all of a sudden you're just not winning, and you don't understand why, and you start basically just letting your emotions and anger take control of you, and maybe there's something you need to do to check yourself in that fashion too. I don't know, what do you think about that as far as just the personal emotional bit of it?
Oh, I mean, that's definitely it. And like a lot of times, like you may see a similar situation and take the same line you always have, and it doesn't work out the same, and you get angry and you think like it's the deck's fault, and it's not. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you need to know the meta a little bit better. Maybe there's something you didn't think of, and you need to change your line of play for that reason. When that happens, the biggest thing what I do is if I'm online, I finish my match, tell my opponent GG respectfully, as long as they're not, who makes me go through a combo with Freed from the Reel and take 20 minutes. Asshole. I close out of the match. I get up from the computer. I walk away. I go make a cup of coffee, put a snack or something in the microwave and heat it up, eat it, drink my coffee, take like 20 minutes, reassess where I'm at. It's just a game. Sit back down, play again. I actually had to do that today. Like I was testing against blue-white, a matchup I know is horrendous.
We're talking standard now, right?
It's the same thing, though. It's the same thing.
Yeah, just clarifying.
Yeah, definitely. But it happened today while I was testing for the regional. I'm sitting there and I'm playing against blue-white, and it's like I get them down to 4 life, and it just doesn't matter. I can't seem to close the game out. I just was like, all right, man, I just need like 5 minutes. I'm going to go buy a monster. I'm going to go to the bathroom. I cleared my head. I came back, played the next game, did not win, but I feel like I played the game much better, and I saw the lines that I needed to make. And it's like, I don't mind if I lose as long as I know I'm doing everything in my power to try to win. But if I make a mistake and start blaming my deck, I know at that point I need to back off and just like mentally take a break for even if it's just 5 or 10 minutes. It doesn't take very long to just get the thought out of your head, reassess, center yourself, and then get back to playing Magic. Because if you're in a tournament and that happens and you can't do that, you're just going to go downhill. 1 loss isn't the end of the world. 2 losses isn't the end of the world. However, that 3rd loss is. Generally 3 losses, you can't top 8 the event that you're in. 2 losses, you can. So what you need to do is you need to just step away. I did it at my PPTQ this weekend. Like, I didn't feel bad. I wasn't blaming my deck. I just felt really frustrated with what was going on because nothing seemed to be going right. I went outside. I took a walk around the block, came back. I won my next 2 matches. Sometimes you just got to find that. I don't like to use the word because I'm not really like that spiritual kind of person, but just that zen, like that balance and how you feel mentally and emotionally with the game. And maybe that's getting a little too nitty gritty for some people. But in reality, like if you're not mentally in it, you're not going to win. Like that's just the cold, hard truth of the game. It is a very mentally taxing game. And there are very few people out there who can grind. That's why the people who play the game professionally are pros. They can handle that on a daily basis. And that's why people like Rob and I sit here and we're like, yeah, we top 8 at a PTQ once. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, that was dope.
And, like, let's be real. like if you're grinding Moto every day and you're playing Moto for 12 hours a day and then you go to a GP and you're like, all right, well, this is my paycheck this week. And then you end up going like 11-5 and not cashing. How do you feel? Feels like you feel like shit. The pros have the ability to move on past that. I mean, personally, I'd be ecstatic at 11-5. I think that's sweet. But it's like in reality, a lot of people get to that point and they miss. And they just get pissed off at themselves. And then you never hear of them again. Or maybe it's a pro it happens to. And then the next week you look and you're like, oh, wow, they went 0-2. Like, that's unheard of. Like, who is this? This isn't so-and-so. And it's like, it sometimes you just get into these funks. And you got to find a way to break it. And the best way to break it is to just kind of step away and reassess.
Yeah, that mental reset is a huge piece of it, and I also think that there's a different way to kind of mentally reset, and I'm glad that you brought up, kind of examples and stuff with pro level players, because another way that you can go about finding that different perspective is to seek out the counsel of players that are better than you, because no matter how good you think you are, I don't care, somebody's better. And maybe they're just better today. If you're LSV, somebody can be better than you today, even though you're LSV, whatever.
Oh, you mean Paulo?
Yeah, usually, right?
I mean, like Paul, I think LSV has officially said that Paulo is number 2 in the all-time like list.
Yeah, I think at this point
behind Finkel.
Yeah, totally. But point is, and honestly, yeah, there's days where Buddha's better than Finkel, right? But the point is, because we could just dance with that all day. The point is, there's always somebody better than you that has a different perspective that you might not have thought of. And this also kind of goes hand in hand with how much we harp on, the point of these events is to make friends and strengthen connections and stuff like that, because that's another way that you can find, like, hey man, I've been doing shitty with whatever deck. What do you think? Like, this is the situation I was in. This is the line I took. What do you think about it? Even if it's not somebody that's obviously better than you, just somebody that you trust to talk about and kind of be vulnerable with that plays Magic, it's good enough. Like, just get a different mind in on the decision tree that you followed, and you'll certainly come to a different conclusion or find some different information that you had in the midst of that game or that match, and you'll have that aha moment. Like, it never feels like it when you're in the midst of kind of the downtrend or the rut, but an aha moment is always close, and you just need to know how to find it, and that's one great way to do it.
I can't argue with any of that.
Yeah,
that's totally where I'm at.
And I mean, and you see, like, all over the place, people are part of multiple Facebook groups of, based on format. Like, we post our link in Pauper MTG, and there's 3,000 people in there. That's a place that you could even go. If you have a local group, like I know a lot of people from our area, we have our own Pauper group, we have our own Modern group, we have all kinds of different groups, and it's just, there's resources out there that are very easy to access to be like, I need help. And that's probably the hardest part of it, is admitting, like, God, I suck right now, and I don't know why. I would like to find out why I suck, so I can not suck. And that's a great place to do it. Other people. It's an endless resource.
And I mean, I know I suck because I inhale food and beer. But no, anybody who knows me will agree to this. Like, if I know somebody's better than me, I'm not afraid to just, like, sit there and just talk to them about the match that I played against them and try to learn from them and what they were seeing, so that when it comes to time in the future, if that situation happens again, I know how I can prepare. And it's really just seeking that counsel. Sometimes it's hard. You got to be very humble with all of it and realize that, you're not the best player. You're not Paulo. You're not, somebody who's top 8 at like 16 Pro Tours. It just doesn't happen. And for most of us, it's not being afraid to ask those questions to somebody who you think may be better than you. And if you are better than somebody, when somebody asks you a question, don't be afraid to answer it. Help them out. The way that we get better is by making other people better. And the way that they get better is by playing against people who are better than them. So seek out tough competition. And if you lose, ask them what they were thinking during the match, the lines that they saw. Talk to them about the match. Like, that's the best way to grow as a player, in my opinion.
Yeah, I definitely agree with all of that. And, I think that a trap that you can fall into, which makes it hard to see these solutions as far as, helping yourself. Pauper still obviously is massively primarily played on Magic Online. Magic Online, as you alluded to earlier, it's really easy to just hemorrhage a bunch of money right in a row because you don't have to get up and go anywhere. You don't have to do anything special. You basically just sit there on your computer, and if you are doing poorly, you can just insert $8 more like you're sitting in front of a slot machine, right? And you can just do it robotically over and over and over, and it's just really hard to detach yourself from that mechanism and realize, like, hey, I need to do something differently before I do this again, or else I'm just going to keep putting $8 more into this stupid machine. So I guess, that's just kind of a point that I wanted to throw in there, is like just the way that we primarily are able to access the format is also something that makes it a little tougher potentially for us Pauper players to kind of take any kind of considerations like this into account, because it's so easy to just basically mill yourself out of your wallet. It's really scary sometimes, actually.
Yeah. Don't fall in that pit trap, or pitfall. You need to realize that enough is enough, and you need to step away. It's not gambling. It's not poker. Even though I think poker is a fair way to draw conclusions to Magic or similarities.
Mm-hmm.
I know Marshall and LSV talk about it. LSV doesn't play poker. But when you're losing a lot, sometimes you need to just sit a few hands out. Just take a break and kind of reassess where you're at. And it's like Magic's the same way. Don't just keep throwing money at it, hoping that the results change, because that's not what the problem is.
Right. And just kind of one more thing that I wanted to bring up, at least from my side, is sometimes it can really help to just have a palate cleanser available to you. Like I kind of mentioned a little earlier about, you have access to more than one deck. Why don't you just try a different deck? Well, don't necessarily just line yourself up for another freaking league or challenge with some deck that you just built, right? Like something that I find, at least personally, that helps me kind of clear out all the cobwebs. I guess, for example, I started running into a pretty bad rut playing elves, which I think I mentioned a couple weeks ago, and I would just do the same damn thing over and over and over because, I'm elfing, so I must continue elfing, and it's not working. Is go into just some practice queues and play something that's absolutely off the wall different from what you've been running into problems with. I, for example, broke away from that elf chain and hung up the computer for the day. The next day, I went into practice queues and played blue-black control. And I didn't care how I did. I didn't care what the results were because obviously they're inconsequential. It's a practice room. But it was just working different neural pathways to get, I guess, technical about it. I got out of, drop a forest, play an elf, and then can I play 2 elves or 3 elves next turn? And that whole flow chart. No, now it's, basically, I need to preserve my life total. I need to play reactively. I don't need to rush to kill my opponent. I don't fear sweepers. It's using different pathways in your brain and different trains of thought, and that's something that can kind of clear out the bullshit and the trash from the kind of the pathways that you were using while you were in your downturn there.
Yeah, and that's actually how I got onto Affinity in the first place. Is I was just in this really big rut with the blue-black flicker deck with Chittering Rats and Archaeomancer, Seagate Oracles, Ghostly Flicker, Dinrova Horror. Is like I had like a month-long streak of just going like 2-3, 3-2, barely making it above where I wanted to be in leagues. And I mean, in all honesty, we all own a 5-0, but let's be real, 4-1, 3-2 is like consistently the dream because if you 3-2, you're making money.
Yep.
But like I was falling just short of that 3-2 mark. And I'm like, all right, let's change it up. And I just jumped into Affinity and just had crazy success with it. And it's like, okay, well, I'm going to keep playing this until it gets bad, until I start doing poorly with it. There was a point where I did online. So I stopped playing it online, but I kept playing it in paper when I was doing well. And then just honored that agreement that I made with everybody where, if I lost, I would stop playing with it. And now I'm just playing I play a different random deck every week and have a blast.
See, and that's the thing with this format of Pauper too, is that it's so broad and fun. Like, don't shut yourself out of stuff that you could be doing to still be having fun with it. Like, just don't make the game unfun for yourself. And I guess, Seth, you get the last word on this, but if I can just boil it all down to one line, it's if things aren't going well, there's something that has to change, and give yourself a chance to find out what it is that you need to change.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen in an hour, 5 minutes. But you can do things to adjust yourself and keep yourself in check to make that transition and that journey to learn that easier. It's going to take, sometimes it takes a year. Sometimes it's 6 months. Everybody's different. But what you got to realize is where you're at and just evaluating the situation of what's going on within the game. And I don't mean that like in a specific game, like, oh, shit, I'm just dead on board. This is bullshit. You're going to have to edit that. But it's like, that's not what I'm talking about. But like in the game of Magic, where are you? Are you mentally invested into this game? I will be one to speak personally. When it comes to the most success I've had in Magic, I was fully invested in the game. I was spending my free time at work brewing decks, thinking of cards that I could financially be investing in, which I did. Just making myself better that way. It's not something that's for everybody, but I was trying to make it onto the Pro Tour. I still am. I have a kid now. I don't have the time for that. Like it's really hard to devote literally 24/7, 365 to Magic, especially once you have kids, once you have a life. But there's still enough time in every day that you can devote 1, maybe 2 hours to Magic. I'm not going to be greedy and say, oh yeah, you should just, 6 hours a day, you should focus on Magic. No. 2, 1, 3 in that order. I think 2 is the happy place. If you do more than 2, most people will get burnt out very quickly. If you can devote 7 hours a week to Magic, that's more than most people do.
God,
that's going to start putting you above.
That sounds like 7 hours of fun to me.
Right. And it's like I'm at the point where I devote about 30 hours a week to Magic, excluding podcast, excluding, just random thoughts at work. I play approximately 4 to 5 hours online every Wednesday. I play a PPTQ or RPTQ, GP, Star City Games Open every Saturday. If there's nothing going on, guess what? I'm going to Standard Showdown and I'm playing 3 rounds of Standard, and I'm going to stick around. I'm going to play EDH for a little while. It's not a competitive format, but it keeps my mind right. And it's really about, if you want to get better and be the best that you can be, you've got to put the time in. And when it comes to putting the time in, there's going to be, crossroads and frustrations that come with it. And you've really got to learn how to push yourself past that and analyze the situation that's got you stopped and realize what's wrong and how do you fix that? Like, what do you need to change as a player, and what do you need to change within the contents of your deck? Because I will tell you that it's not always the deck. The deck that your 75 could be perfect, 100%. Nothing needs changed, but maybe there's a few small changes you need to make in the lines of play that you're making. And the biggest example I can use is teaching new Affinity players who are playing Memnite before their Springleaf Drum. They'll go like land Memnite, and then they'll tap their land and play Springleaf Drum so they can play another 1-drop. And it's like, okay, well, I'm going to Bolt or Gal Blast your Memnite. And now guess what? I essentially just time walked them. I took away their first turn. And then they're like, well, that's rude. Now I can't do anything. Well, yeah, that's why I did it. You sequenced your plays wrong. Sometimes it's just sequencing. But take a step. Don't be afraid to take that step back after a match and analyze everything that went wrong in that match and learn from it. And this is coming from somebody who just came off of one of the worst testing sessions I've ever had. It was a tough night for me playing Magic. But I stepped back when I got frustrated. I looked at what I was doing. My opponents were doing, the lines they were taking, and I adjusted to it. And sometimes that's all you need to do. And I know that we're getting super deep into this episode, and again, I'm starting to ramble and just talk your ear off.
Yeah, I can hear you sweating. Seth is
my
pissed.
shirt's a little tight. Rob and I were talking about, before we started recording, about this. Like, this is the reason I took the job that I have as a leader. This is the reason I started doing this podcast, is to help make people get better and help people do what they want to do and accomplish in life and in, Magic the Gathering. And this is an episode that doesn't just pertain to Pauper. This is almost as much advice as I can give you in a single episode when it comes to like mentally leveling up. And I know I'm not a pro. I'm not the best player in the world. But I feel like I've got some kind of an insight due to the amount of Magic that I've played over the time I've been playing. I devoted 3 years of my life to this game, to the point where I lost track of where I was with my job, with my school. And I'm telling you, these are the things that I've learned. So if you take anything away from this episode, learn that, it's not always you as a player. It's not always the deck. Sometimes it's small adjustments that you have control of, that you have to make, whether it's tuning a deck or tuning your mind. and make that adjustment. Don't be afraid to try something new within the game, because that's the only way that you're going to grow. On that note, Rob, I don't have anything else, man. I think I've covered it pretty well.
Well, I'll tell you what. Come this November, you got my vote. You got me all lathered up. So,
I mean, I will say that this was one of the best weeks at work I've had in a while. So
yeah, that's exciting, and couple that with some pretty good couple of days for me too, and why not get all hot and gassy, right? So
this is what I enjoy, and like this is why I wanted to do the podcast, is episodes like this.
Hell yes. So with that, let's wrap this one up. Everybody, let's go through the script again. You know it by now. Just like all those wonderful people at the start of the episode, they went to patreon.com/pauperlyrated and showed some support for the show. If you decide to do that, thank you very much in advance. We post the episodes to Podbean and to iTunes. You can catch us on Twitter at pauperlyrated, facebook.com/pauperlyrated as well. And you can shoot us mailbag stuff or whatever the hell else you want at pauperlyrated@gmail.com as well. So, to wrap this thing totally up, I got some good news and I got some bad news, man. What do you want first?
Let's go with the bad news. I like ending everything on a good, positive note.
Me too. So the bad news, at least for you guys as the listeners, this following week, Seth has the RPTQ that he's been putting all this time and energy into. I have my bachelor party that I'm going to waste a lot of energy at. So we're going to sit out a week. I know, but it's for the best, because otherwise you're going to get a half-ass episode that's probably being recorded in the back of a car. So,
or a brewery.
Who knows? We could be anywhere. We could be face down in a ditch. It'd sound terrible, but
that was almost me 2 weeks ago. So yes.
So we're gonna sit out a week. Thanks for bearing with us during that. You know, it's stuff that we've seen coming for a while, and we're gonna try to squeeze an episode in with all that going on, but it's not quite gonna work. So just bear with us. 2 weeks from today, we'll have a brand new episode. We'll go over the classic results, because that'll be happening by then too, and we'll have some fun new topics, and we'll be back fresh and all ready to go. Would you like the good news now?
Yes, please. My body is ready.
So, one of the things that's going to keep us busy next week, that is going to keep us from releasing another episode, is our good pals at Frogtown Hobbies. Rob Kaufman, the owner there, we talked to him. We're going to have a special Thursday night Pauper event on, Thursday, June 7th? If you're in the Toledo, Ohio area, Northwest Ohio, Southeast Michigan, anywhere around there, come on down to Frogtown Hobbies. We'll be there. It's frogtownhobbies.com to check out the location and information with them. But they are hosting us. We're going to be having a super fun Pauper event on Thursday. Seth and I will both be there. I'm going to be back home before the whole bachelor party thing. I'm going to be rip-raring to go. You're going to get me before I basically just deflate and float into the wind by about Friday at 5 p.m. We're going to jam Pauper, and we want you there. We want to play with you guys. We want to meet you guys if we don't know you, haven't met you yet. That'd be so awesome if you could make it in there. There's going to be bounties on our heads. We're going to have extra prizes if you can kick our ass, and even if you play us and lose, because let's face it, sometimes we win matches too, right? So that's going to be great. Head on down there and see if you can beat us.
I already have a spicy brew I'm working on.
Yeah, that's the hardest part. After we kind of sorted everything out with with Frogtown, the next thing I thought was, shit, now I got to come up with something to play.
Yeah, I will state that it is not a stock list. It is nothing you will have seen before. Maybe I've talked about it. Maybe I haven't. Who knows? I'm working on it. We'll figure it out when we get there. But if you're interested in it, come check it out. Come see us. We'll be there. I'll have a brew. Rob will have some kind of a deck with him. I don't know. He'll probably just play Stompy because it's Rob. But
hey, no promises.
I mean, or you'll play a deck with Lightning Bolt in it because that's not unnormal.
No. Come at me, all ye bros and sisses, and we'll see. We're going to put a link to the Facebook event for that on our Facebook page. So please do come on in, check that out. We'd love to meet you guys. We're going to be there pretty much all night. It starts at 6:30. local time, which is Eastern time. So if for some ungodly reason you're popping over from Utah or something like that, but come on in and see us. Maybe we'll get paired up. It'll be a great time.
I'm excited for it at this point. I actually get to play Magic on a Thursday that's not on a computer, so that's exciting for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's going to be weird for me, too.
To interact with real people is exciting for me.
That sounds like you're in a great place.
I mean, but yeah, definitely. Like, come out and see us. It's just, it's going to be a great time. It's my last like casual night before I start. Like, I've been preparing for the regional. I'm going to continue to. Thursday is like my last break before I just go like balls to the wall, like set on it, like where I am tunnel visioned and everything else like that. So you guys can come and you can be my last distraction before I go play in a regional Pro Tour qualifier. And I would love nothing more than to see you guys there.
So yeah, come check us out there. And if you can't check us out at the event, Seth's going to be streaming. Yeah,
so next Wednesday, I actually adjusted the days that I have my kid, so I will not be streaming next Wednesday. I may try to sneak a few hours in during the afternoon if she decides to take a nap. I will be streaming hopefully at least one day while I'm away, like maybe Friday night when I'm away for the regional from North Carolina. Otherwise, I will be on Friday and Saturday this week, depending on when Rob gets this posted.
It'll be Friday.
Friday? All right, so I'll be on, Friday night, twitch.tv/SoothMcGooth. I went ahead and changed my Twitch handle to the nickname that our friends have given me. And, I'm still having some issues with MTGO running and getting that stream to look nice for everybody. So I will be streaming Arena. It will be a deck that's very similar to what I'm playing at the regional, so I can get true reps in against decks that I think I may see while I'm there. Just trying to get a feel for the format. And there will be some tunes, I guarantee it. We'll have music. We'll have some chicanery. I'll have beer. I may get drunk on stream. Who knows? We'll find out when we get there. But if you're interested in, talking to me personally, directly, like not really face to face, but like at instant speed, having a conversation with me, hit me up on there. I'll be there. Generally, I stream for 2 to 3 hours, not super long, because it's so late at night. But yeah, I'll definitely be available, and I probably put more energy into interacting with chat than I do into my actual Magic playing. So you'll get good quality interaction with Seth, but not Magic the Gathering.
I'll take that deal. And yeah, we'll put a link to the Twitch channel and the Facebook and on Twitter as well. So if we don't see you next Thursday at the super fun Pauper event, and if for some reason Seth doesn't see you at the RPTQ or on stream, we'll talk to you in, right about 2 weeks.
Have a good one, everyone. You mean the game of basketball?
Yes, part 4.
So we can watch LeBron just do LeBron things again.
God, hopefully. That'd be nice.
I mean, I want him to win one because everybody who has a brain knows that he's leaving.
Yeah, well, of course, yeah. Yeah, and it's just, it just sucks because this is clearly the worst team he's had. And this might be the best team Golden State's had. So I don't know how that works.
Iguodala is out tomorrow?
Yeah, Iguodala's been out basically for most of the playoffs, so I mean that is kind of what it is. But
that's a big win for LeBron though, because that's normally who plays defense.
Yeah, for sure. So like
Golden State can't play defense. They just run your ass off and make you break your hamstring because they shouldn't even be in the finals right now.
Yeah, and like. I mean, the Iguodala thing could be important because then you'll have to probably have one of the three. They'll probably have to put Durant on him, and if you can get Durant in foul trouble, that's a thing. So We'll see.
Oh yeah, and he's also just not good at defense. Like he is like one of the worst defenders in the league.
Yeah, I mean, well, so's Cleveland's whole team. So
Outside of LeBron.